Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished presenters. We are about to make a start. On behalf of the University Council of Jamaica, I warmly welcome you to our third day of the Council's 17th Annual Quality Assurance in Higher Education Week, under the theme, Maintaining Quality in Higher Education in a Digital Environment. I'm Ruby Brown, your chair for today's session. I've had the awesome privilege since 2006 to serve as CEO for the Management Institute for National Development, as we often refer to as MIND. And MIND is the Government of Jamaica's Public Sector Management and Leadership Development Institute. MIND is therefore charged with the responsibility for building capability for public service excellence. You'll readily see, therefore, the alignment between our mandate and that of the University Council of Jamaica, with whom MIND has been associated since the 1990s. It's a relationship that we greatly value, for we are mindful that we have in common with all other agencies, departments, and ministries of government the need to operate within a context of continuously promoting service excellence with the aim to ensure the consistent delivery of efficient and high-quality services to the public. And the UCJ supports us in ensuring this. I recall many moons ago when I started as head of MIND, receiving a call that, there were 3 gentlemen downstairs that wanted to speak with me. And when the gentlemen came up, looking all dapper in their black suits, without much delay, they shared with me that they were investigating a matter respecting the falsification of academic credentials and noted the person who was the focus of their investigation. And every time I think about this, I have to smile because in my naivety and maybe mixed with much surprise, I asked the detective whether or not they were sure. And to which one member of the group quickly responded with an undeniable air of confidence, "Madam, that matter's been under investigations for months now." I want to say to you that that was my eye-opening experience to credential fraud, and a problem that seems to have been growing over time. I'm therefore excited about today's sessions, and I know we all are. All of us on this platform today are equally excited, because certainly it's going to allow us to examine under the magnifying glass credential fraud and diploma mills in the digital environment. And we are going to be doing so with a certain knowledge that if nothing else, we will be walking away from this webinar having been helped to increase our awareness of credential fraud and diploma mills in higher education. We'll also be walking away being able to identify techniques for detecting fraudulent academic documents and degree mills, as well as we will see highlighted in the presentations today, the measures that are being used by examiners, higher education institutions, and employers in Jamaica to detect and prevent credential fraud. So to our presenters, I want to say on behalf of the University Council of Jamaica and all of us here, an extra special welcome. And as we would say in a true Jamaican style, we can't wait to hear from you. Yes, we are looking forward to the rich research and experiences that will undoubtedly undergird your presentations today. And so, let us not delay any longer. And so I now want to invite Mrs. Denzel Williams, Director Principal of the Vocational Training Development Institute to say the opening prayer. Mrs. Williams, please.
Good morning, distinguished colleagues. Let us adopt an attitude and posture for prayer as we pray. Our loving, heavenly, and compassionate Father, we are indeed grateful to you for your love, your mercy, and your grace. Father, you continue to bless us, even though there are times when we don't deserve it, and we are humbled and grateful. Father, as you know, this week is UCJ's Quality Assurance Week. And Lord, I just want to take a moment to thank you for the UCJ. Thank you, Lord, for their commitment to enabling the development of quality assurance in higher education in Jamaica. Father, please bless the UCJ team and bless the leadership of the UCJ. We look forward to a treat today, Lord, and so we pray your blessing on every single presenter. May they have clarity of thought and clarity of speech. And to those of us who are attending, Lord, may we be attentive and may we be willing and humble to unlearn when necessary and be open to new learning. Because we know, Lord, that leaders who learn best lead best. Father, may none of us online today fall prey to scams of any kind, including credential fraud, but instead give us and our respective teams the knowledge, wisdom, and the eye of discernment that we need. And so today we place all the proceedings into your hands and we thank you in advance for a productive workshop. This is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
And thank you, Mrs. Williams. Very fine start for the morning. So we'll be examining today's theme, Credential Fraud and Diploma Mills in the Digital Environment, in 2 sessions. We're going to first take a global look at this issue, and then after we will converge on what's happening locally from the perspectives of the examiners and learning institutions. At the end of each session, we will have a question and answer discussion. So throughout the session, please do not hesitate to use the Zoom question and answer feature to post your questions. And I want to note this, it's the Zoom question and answers feature, not the chat, that we'll be using to post your question. So we now move right to our first session, Credential Fraud and Diploma Mills, a Global Threat. And to introduce our presenter, we're going to invite Julia Funaki to do just that for us. So Julia, we turn over to you.
Good morning, everyone. We are delighted to be here with you. I am Julia Funaki, as was just introduced, and I join you from my home in Virginia. I am going to start the presentation in just a second, but I'd like to first mention Mr. David Mahali, of ACRO, who's speaking to you from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where today his high will be a generous -2 degrees Celsius. So he will hopefully be with you in mind as well as on this video because of the cold temperatures. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to this presentation. We're honored to be with you for your 17th Annual Quality Assurance in Higher Education Week, and we are grateful for your invitation to have a discussion about this very important topic, which has obviously accelerated in the internet age. It's a really important topic during this very stressful time. Certainly COVID has, and as all crises do, increased the amount of fraud and diploma mills that we do see. Protecting our institutions from academic fraud is one of the most important things we can do. We've all seen many examples of how this has happened during COVID-19, and we hope to just give you some ideas about how crises bring out the very best in people, but they can also bring out the very worst of people. And we all need a reminder to be careful. So with that, I'm going to begin sharing my screen. Okay, hopefully you can all see this. So there's a photo of my friend Dave and my colleague Dave Mahali. And as we begin, the first thing I want to say is that at the end of this, we're going to talk about ACRO resources, and there are many. But I want to just mention the ACRO International Guide. Now, this was published 6 years ago in March of 16. It's a comprehensive resource, really providing higher educational professionals a solid foundation of all the knowledge in the field of international education. There are 37 chapters covering a multitude of topics, including comprehensive internationalization, recruiting and promoting the success of international students, working with agents, establishing dual and joint degree programs, and what we're going to focus on today, fighting fraud. Also are included in this, there are 7 chapters on best practices for external and in-house international transfer credit evaluation, along with 4 case studies and 6 country studies. So just a publication I'd like to draw your attention to. So today we're going to, we talk about these resources. Today our topic is fraud. And this is, as we sort of mentioned at the beginning, a prime time for fraudsters, both near and far, both domestically and internationally, who are checking to see if you are paying attention to the documents they want you to accept. We want to help you stay aware of the existence of fraud in our work environment and learn some of the signs of fraud. We all need a reminder about the importance of doubling down on due diligence, a word we're going to use often, and best practices in reviewing academic documents. We'll talk about the value of the need to be flexible in this very strange environment, but always within the boundaries of best practice. And keep in mind how decisions we make now will affect our future reality. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, David.
Thanks very much, Julia. I'm very glad to be here and really appreciate the invitation to talk about something that's really on our minds continually, and that is the issue of academic fraud and degree fraud. So let's talk about fraud. What does fraud mean? Basically, fraud is the misrepresentation of a document or a person or a situation, something purporting to be what it isn't. People do fraud in academic circles for the same reasons they do it in other areas, which is usually financial gain. The roots of fraud are planted in a desire to gain something of value by misrepresentation. There are systemic cultures around the world where fraud exists, and there is individual fraud. And you will probably be faced with both at some point in your work. So we have to stop and think, what makes us or our institutions vulnerable to fraud? What would somebody have to gain from fraud with respect to your institution? What is the market value of your institution's name or its reputation? And who is protecting your institution? I invite each of you to believe that you are on the front lines and you have the authority to both detect and stop fraud when it's presented to you. And we'll go to the next slide, please, Julia. And before you see a graphic of something called the tree of academic fraud, which comes from a fraud in education, the worm in the apple. Academic fraud involves a deliberate effort to deceive and includes plagiarism, fabrication of data, misrepresentation rather of historical sources, tampering with evidence, selective suppression of unwanted or unacceptable results, and the theft of ideas. issues on the tree of fraud here probably look familiar, and the ones on the right side are the types that we usually see in admissions and records at our institutions. The left side pertains more to the academic function of the institution. But at the base of all of these is the issue of misrepresentation. And since the internet, the development of the internet, fraud has grown and the internet has grown, with the result that, next slide please, we need a bigger tree. There are other types of fraud that you'll be presented with. They include, for example, misrepresentation or unauthorized representation of the institution, misuse of your own branding, endorsements, the existence of counterfeit transcripts. There can also be fake representatives, foreign agents who are recruiting international students, for example, purporting to be from legitimate student recruiting agency or from your own institution. There's fraud regarding financial documents for the purpose of financial aid. This is especially prevalent in the United States. But there are documents related to immigration of students. Here in the United States, it would be Form I-120 and things related to getting the visa to actually come. You there have extension of stay documents and other things where misrepresentation can begin. High school diplomas and transcripts, for example, for athletes are common places where fraud is creeping in. Probably are aware that we here in the United States are still watching the fallout of the Varsity Blues operation that gained international attention. This involved parents paying money and misrepresenting athletic achievement of their own children who were largely unaware of this misrepresentation. And this has led to lawsuits from other students who feel that their admissions were compromised based on the fraud for that situation. So as long as the internet has existed, we've had fake online suppliers. I'm sorry, I'm seeing in the comments that the level is a little low for you, so I'm going to try to increase the microphone here. All right. So if we can go, Julia, back to or onto the next slide about the essentialness of due diligence.
I seem to have lost control of the slides. I'm not sure why that is. Here we go. I think. Okay.
Thanks. I just I'm going to try to take a moment and adjust my microphone level if I can.
We're actually hearing you much better now.
All right. So I'm hearing that the level is better.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll speak up. Anyway, we'd like to share 3 perspectives on why this due diligence that we'll be talking about, which involves direct action by you and your colleagues, is essential. The first consideration is an ethical one. Due diligence creates a campus culture that rewards honesty and has a reputation for diligence. A reputation for diligence is a good way to protect the institution because fraudsters are always looking for the weakest link and word travels fast. It enhances public trust. Graduates and former students are out in public hearing the institutions, bearing the institution's banner rather in their careers. Your work is to protect the institution based on your institution's code of ethics and honesty, and your students are depending on you to protect the value of their degrees. And this really gets to the heart of it. Degree fraud involves people not doing any academic work at all. It's a transactional operation where money is paid and degrees or qualifications are mailed or couriered or, emailed, transferred electronically. It's not fair to your students, and it harms your institution, obviously. There are legal perspectives that affect why you should do due diligence. Your institution has legal obligations in many areas, obviously, and to your government and funding sources and to all the parties with whom the institution signs any sort of contract. If you enroll international students, for example, you're legally obliged to the immigration authorities in the country. So we think back again to the current admissions bribery scandal in the news and everything, and that's exactly what the defendants are being charged with. It's misrepresentation, and it all has money as the root of it. So due diligence and a process for ensuring it's policy and set procedures that are clearly written and clearly communicated are essential when it comes to the legal aspects of handling fraud. There are practical considerations. Academically, your accreditation might be put in jeopardy. There can be a perception just in the general population that the institution is not diligent, and that kind of publicity is not good for an institution, obviously. So we think about fraud as a ticking time bomb, and it can, for instance, there are medical degrees that are purported to be from various institutions that aren't even what we'll call diploma mills, and talk about later. This can have a catastrophic effect on people's health if they get somebody who's not a real practicing medical professional who has the credentials that say that the person is. So next slide, please. Practices for maintaining and performing our due diligence. Staff training in the documents required and how to review them when you get transcripts from any institution. This includes both initial training and ongoing professional development. Use of trusted resources. Know the origin of the resources you're using to check on an institution. Are you using an authentic source? We have to be careful on the internet, obviously. Is communication clear at your institution about the documentary requirements and about the consequences of submitting fraudulent documents? Is that information clearly stated in your catalog or online presence? Do the employees and representatives of the institution have a standard procedure for document review that's applied consistently? Think about what your verification process is for the irregular documents. Is that documented, and are all the people involved in checking documents aware of it? Who does the follow-up and tracking when fraud has been confirmed? What's the time schedule for this? Also, who develops the fraud-related policies at your institution? Where are these policies kept? These are all questions about practices that form your due diligence and help shape the approaches and response to fraud at your institution. Next slide, please. And here we have basically a repetition of sentences that convey something very important to us now that we're still in an ongoing global pandemic. Fraud preys on the vulnerability created by disruption. Our usual operating procedures at institutions were disrupted greatly during the pandemic. They can be disrupted by natural or human-caused disasters also, but we've all been working from home and not in the usual office. Many of us are accepting transcripts that are sent by email from institutions, and we all know that it's possible to spoof the email sending address of something, so you have to be very careful. We don't have our usual tools sometimes at home, but we can still apply the practices and procedures that the institution has developed. So there have been distractions, and someone bent on committing fraud is counting on you to be distracted and trying to slip in under the radar when your mind is elsewhere. Just as we protect our own personal health, we have to do our due diligence to protect the institution and the institution's students. Next slide, please. Well, I'll just continue and maybe we'll get that worked out. So we need to reduce our vulnerability by doubling down on our due diligence now more than ever. And we still have to be sensitive to the limitations around the issuing and transmission of official academic documents. It's a balancing act, and how do we approach that? Next slide, please. At ACRO, as soon as we started seeing that higher education institutions were shutting down because of COVID-19, we knew that we were going to have to develop a policy of flexibility in accepting documents, but we still had to maintain our due diligence. Our protocol for the COVID-19 closures, set of policies and procedures giving guidance to our evaluators on how to handle these documents took effect on March 14, 2020. About a week later, we published a generic protocol and guidelines which were based on the protocol. Starting place for developing such a policy is to know what's going on, researching whether an institution is actually closed. When did the institution close? What's the evidence that it's closed? That's the first step. And this is in regard to any recognized academic institution, not just a diploma will. That's a kind of a separate matter. But we had to find out what was possible in terms of obtaining records. Some administrators were going into buildings at some times and could send documents occasionally. But many of the personnel were sending documents via email only from their own homes. Some institutions had electronic databases that could be used for verification and others didn't. The thing to consider is whether you and your institution will accept those forms of documentation. And you've obviously gone through and developed procedures and policies regarding that. This was just to illustrate what we at ACRO had decided. It's always a matter of balance when we have a disruption such as the pandemic, but you want to be flexible and help students in their mobility, and at the same time, you don't want to open the door to a fraudster. Next slide, please. Now, I hinted at this before. We have a systemic fraud where we have, parts of the world where we expect to see some level of fraud. And then we have individual fraud, so that anywhere in the world, an individual can be trying to gain a document or a qualification to which he or she isn't legitimately entitled. So this could involve rather the alteration of an authentic document, such as one of your own diplomas. The person could be creating a document from scratch. They might be buying a counterfeit document from based on a real institution's diploma, or buy documents online from a business that calls itself a university. And here's where we kind of get into the diploma mill area. Oftentimes the first signal we get that something is amiss is the student's claim of the unavailability of documentation. It's very rare that we would never have any documentation for a program. And shutdowns of institutions during the pandemic is a good environment for fraudsters to try to force you or entice you to take their fake documents, because normal verification channels are shut down. Next slide, please. So this graphic, it's very hard to see. Unfortunately, there are some smaller countries. It's hard to even gauge the color according to the scale. But we have areas of the world where there's cultures of corruption, and of course we have to be vigilant. Your institutions doubtless have policies on which institutions need special documentation or additional verification. But this doesn't mean that so-called low systemic fraud environment countries don't have the same kind of problems. The internet reaches everywhere, and people bent on committing fraud exist in all populations. Next slide, please. So we get into the problem of purchase documents. And here, I won't belabor the point. You can buy any degree with any field of study, any major, any concentration, any courses, any grades, any credit or hour of study values. You can buy any degree from just about any institution online. Everything's available for sale. It used to be in the back of magazines and matchbook covers that these fraudulent operations were able to operate, and now the internet has just opened it up to anyone. So next slide, please. Here we just have a quick example of transcripts, one that we obtain online, and one of which is a legitimate transcript from Lund University in Sweden. The document on the right, the gray background transcript with a kind of, you would call it a British looking seal, was bought online, and the authentic document is the one on the left with the white background. So the purchase doc looks nothing like the authentic one, but if you're not familiar with the way these transcripts should look, it's easy to get fooled. So when you see a new credential, or when you're presented with something that's new to you, go to your resources for assistance. And this includes internet resources, but also printed resources. And perhaps the most valuable resources are the ones that you're going to find in your colleagues at other institutions. They may have seen the same forged transcript or spurious documents the week before that you're being presented with now. Next slide, please. It may be interesting for all of you in your spare time, such as it might be, to go online and see if any of your own institution's documentation is on sale online. It's likely that many of you have institutions that are having forged credentials made. How good they are is another matter. So here are some things to look out for diploma mill and spurious degrees. This is a large category of fraud, and one that has thrived on the internet, and that is the matter of diploma mills. You have a situation now where the same templates are being used for multiple fake schools, and the degree names and other data are just swapped out. You might not even realize that these universities are fake until you start to research the universities involved. There are many operations that exist, some small, some are quite large. There's a multi-billion-dollar operation operating in Pakistan, however, where even though the actual printing facilities and office facilities were shut down and assets were confiscated, people were jailed, those operations are still running in the background. They had so many people involved, and the agents that work for these corporations, kind of as marketing people, really, kind of along the lines of telemarketing operation, both online and over the phones, are able to keep these things running. And it's not easy for them to say no to the money, because oftentimes it's quite a bit more than they would be paid in another endeavor. Next slide, please. Here's a list of a few red flags that we can watch out for when it comes to diploma mills. Often the name of an institution will be similar to an existing institution. Sometimes the physical location can be determined online using some resources that we'll talk about a little bit later. There's no end of pictures of kind of like corner stores and on busy streets with, which are the locations of these places. And you can actually find this yourself online, doing a little detective work just by looking up the address of an institution that might be on the transcript. Another thing to look out for is the faculty listed prominently in a master list rather than by the department or the school. And these people are often photoshopped in faces of people from the internet on other bodies that they may be taken from other universities or not. False claims of accreditation, accreditation in another country, accreditation someplace where there's no system of accreditation. Sometimes they offer fast turnaround time, rush services available for additional fees, cost deals, package discounts, backdated diplomas available, so you could get your degree dated at a time when you would have been in school. You may have several universities on one computer using the same IP address for several institutions. Often they offer support services, 24/7 hotline support during your lifetime in the form of transcript, reference letters, foreign degree evaluation reports, etc. Next slide, please. One one thing that we see over and over is a school that you look up, and it's accredited by a multitude of bodies. It's not recognized by the Ministry of Education when you looked it up online for that country. It's not recognized by the authority in that country that recognizes higher education institutions, but you see multiple accreditations, accreditation by third country bodies, explanations of why accreditation doesn't really mean anything. International standard certifications, which may or may not be true. Usually they're not. ISO 9001, for example, or accreditation from a spurious accreditation body, one that doesn't really even exist except for the purpose of making you think that an institution's accredited. They may hint at accreditation by virtue of their graduates being admitted to recognized universities in your country or another country, or the fact that graduates are working at prestigious companies all over the world. And of course, you're not able to verify this. Maybe the person is working for Microsoft, who knows? You can never tell. And it's not unusual for a legitimate university to say where their graduates are being hired. So it's just something to look out for. Multiple accreditation is always a red flag in our eyes. Next slide, please. Here we have kind of a redacted transcript from an institution called Trinity College in the UK, sent by email. Now, think of all the Trinity colleges you've heard of. You have Trinity College at the University of Cambridge. You have Trinity College Dublin. You have Trinity colleges all over. I don't even know how many there might be, but there are a lot. So this doesn't look like what we would see as an official transcript, but there are just a few things that make it pop out even more. You can see kind of in the four corners of the transcript, the logo is there, a logo that doesn't belong to any real college. It may have been stolen from another one. I'm getting a little behind, so I'll just go to the next slide here and we'll talk about this some more. So we have a real University of Cambridge Trinity College transcript for both an MPhil and a PhD, and you can see it looks quite different. They're not saying that it's Trinity College, University of Cambridge, but they're trading on the Trinity College name, and things are quite different. It wouldn't be impossible that you would see somebody actually just altering University of Cambridge transcripts also. So that's something to be aware of. In the UK, institutions were not able to send things in the mail, official paper documentation. So we had to work out a way of communicating with the people there and being sure that things coming from an email address that said University of Cambridge actually came from there. Next slide, please. So we see that the format of this transcript looks nothing like a real Trinity College transcript would. But the red flags are that the name of the institution sounds familiar. The format of the document doesn't look like any transcript that we would see from anywhere, but certainly not from Trinity College, Cambridge. Dates and terminologies used on the document are different. The thesis title itself, you can always look up thesis titles and people's names, and the legitimate universities will usually have that in their library, and you can actually find the thesis abstract and things. That's one other way of looking at things. The grade scale is completely kind of, you would call it Americanized. the little images again with the logo of a known diploma mill in this case, which Trinity College is. And next slide, please. There. So here are just a few things to watch out for. This is from the website of trinityeducation.com. These little green arrows serve as our red flags here. They go into an explanation of accreditation of prior learning and prior certificated learning, which are two forms of alternative credit recognition for them. And we have an address of places all over the world where they have offices. There are legitimate overseas offices for a lot of institutions, but here we have the gamut, and you can always look up these addresses using some of the resources that I have listed in one of the next slides, and actually see if you can get a street view of them or get a line on some of the personnel. So we'll go to the next slide. And so as we mentioned before, it's pretty rare that there's no documentation available at a school, but a fraudster might take advantage of a situation in which normal operations have been suspended, such as natural disasters, and think that we aren't going to do our due diligence. Electronic machines that manage data can be operated remotely from home or wherever. Legitimate institutions may shut down and still be able to operate, but we can still exercise our due diligence even if we're not working in our offices. It's just important to always remember that your institution's reputation is on the line. Next slide, please. So I would just like to say that all of you are already trained as fraud detectors. Misspellings exist, whether on printed material or electronic material, improper grammar, bad dates, impossible mathematics. Somebody could, be 12 when they're graduating from sixth form or something when they should be 17 or 18. You might just see strange word combinations that don't sound right to you. Always check it out. Your own gut is the best guide you have sometimes while you're still following the procedures in place. Next slide, please. This is a list of internet research tools. Some of them are quite valuable. You can look up the registration details of websites and find out who's behind them. This is invaluable in checking spurious, institutions operating digitally. There are IP lookup sites, and these have all been tested. These are all live links here. The Internet Archive has a Wayback Machine that you can use to enter an address as it would have been for an institution's website and see if it matches something that you've been given. The image search, you can look for school buildings. Oftentimes they'll use a castle somewhere in the UK to confer some kind of majesty to their school facilities that are operating out of the second floor of a coin laundromat. You can often find out who faculty members actually are just by looking up the face there. And you can look up people on the site in the fifth bar. And important one is just looking at the street view of an institution. Instant Street View and the Show My Street are really neat because you can just put in an address and up pops the ground image, and sometimes satellite images are available of the institutions, and that's one way to check an institution very quickly to see if it's legitimate or not. So it's easy to spoof an email address, meaning we can never be sure if a legitimate looking institutional email has actually come from the institution. These are some tools that you can use when you're questioning the validity of something that you receive online. And we're starting to come up against our time limit here. So I'm going to wrap up now. Even in the midst of the disruption of our routines and our home and stressful professional lives, we have to be focused on our best practices. You may be involved in setting those practices, or you may have an opportunity to refine those practices, but be sure that you know what the practices are and that your employees can access them. Follow, your due diligence steps and procedures, and always be prepared for fraud. And I'm going to just turn it over to Julia so she can talk about the ACRA resources that are involved. I know that we're right up at the bell here.
Thanks, Dave. So ACRA provides a great many resources available for you to do your work. And we've developed a lot of these specifically for dealing with all the disruptions of the COVID-19 epidemic. And so we have a whole section of our website that's just dealing with those, and there they are, a list of them. We also have a number of volumes and webinars and such on fraud, and resources in our ACRA bookstore. These are just a few of the titles that are there. I would also encourage you to refer back to slide 24, where we talked about our report on displaced persons. That provides a lot of information. And as we see these crises that go on around the world continue, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's what we see in Ukraine today, whether it's any of the other number of crises that go on, these all give you sort of an idea of practicing due diligence, being flexible, staying alert, and knowing what's possible and what may not be possible at any time. And with that, we'll wrap up. I will stop sharing and we will turn it over for any questions that we might have.
Hi, beautiful. And thank you so much, David and Julia, for most comprehensive and enlightening coverage of our theme for this session, Credential, Fraud and Diploma Mills, a Global Threat. Certainly, we all have edged in our minds the need for due diligence. And for sure, if nothing else, we saw fraud, preys on vulnerability created by disruption. I liked how you emphasized that so many times. And yes, despite our current situation, we have to be prepared for fraud. So we have the wonderful opportunity now to linger with David a little longer by sharing any questions we have. We have roughly about 8 minutes or so for questions. And as indicated before, you drop your questions, please, in the Q&A section of Zoom. And we have our first question, David. Can you explain some more on the matter of misuse of own branding?
Yes, thank you. The misuse of branding is just a matter of using your university logo, your university letterhead, any proprietary graphic information that your institution has developed that is specific and owned by your institution to use in the production of fraudulent degrees. So it could, I mean, you could even see on a Diploma Mills website a store where you can buy a shirt, for example, or a coffee mug or whatever, with logos that have been taken from your institution and altered. Perhaps somebody might be tempted to use your institution's name or a form of the institution's name. And again, these things often slant toward legitimate university names that are somehow corrupted. Southwestern State University can become Southwestern State University College, or it's just the possibilities are endless. So that's just using things that are specific to your institution, logos and other visual effects usually to make it seem like an institution is legitimate. They're trading on your intellectual property, essentially.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you very much for that. Keep the questions coming. We have this awesome opportunity to pose to David and Judy. I notice here there's a question about making the PowerPoint accessible. I guess.
Yes, we will make sure it's available to you.
All right, beautiful. All right. Any other questions? We still have a few minutes with David.
I would just also, piggybacking on what David said about the branding, that I would make sure that your institution's logos, name and such are indeed copyrighted, that you have taken the steps to make sure those are yours and yours alone. I know that was something that ACRO had to work on in years past, making sure that even our simple logo was copyrighted.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you very much for that. All right. Remember, we are using the Q&A section of Zoom to drop in our questions. And I believe we have another 2 or so minutes to take another question. All right. We have one more here. Can you explain some more? No, that's not the one. Right. Should an institution, this is another one, should an institution have a monitoring mechanism to ensure there's no misrepresentation of their branding? All right. So let me repeat, should an institution have a monitoring mechanism to ensure there's no misrepresentation of their branding? And it's a follow-up from the previous question.
Yeah, I'll just start off here, and Julia, you can chime in. There definitely needs to be a designated person and procedures that look for this kind of thing. It's quite hit or miss. Oftentimes it's just somebody who will be, looking for this kind of thing, or rather think of it as a contact person at your institution to whom anything that anybody else in the institution or the institution sphere can send this information. That's probably the most helpful thing, is just to have people know to whom they should send something if they see something where your logo is being used, or something that may look like your logo. That's the important. It goes back to our having established practices for how to look for these things. Somebody should be involved, and if if there is no one who already has the responsibility, you can present yourself as the person to whom that can be sent, and you can send it up the chain. Always be willing to think that you are in control, even if no one has told you that you are, would be my advice.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you for that. Julia, you were going to add?
No, I would support what Dave says. There are a lot of software programs out there that are available that search and crawl sites to see if your institution is mentioned, where you could find that information, if you want to go to that length. Yet, I think Dave is right. Have a point person and offer yourself to be that point person.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you very much, David and Julia, for that. And thank you for those questions. Certainly, it helped to advance, our understanding of this matter a little further. Beautiful. So certainly, very comprehensive and well received, as you'll see in the chat, a very well received presentation. Thank you so much. And we really look forward to the opportunity to engage with you both on this matter in the future. All right. And thank you too for those links that you left us with, and we certainly will utilize same. At this juncture, we want to now invite the Director of Communications and Public Education with the University Council of Jamaica to engage us in a little poll. All right, so Mr. Najee Murray, the space is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. Good morning, everyone. As Dr. Brown had mentioned, we're going to participate in so much more engagement. So I'm going to ask Mr. Wayne Christian to bring up our first poll for this morning's activity. Mr. Christian will share the link in the chat, and you can also see the questions that will be asked on the screen. Mr. Christian has shared the link. Please do participate. Right. So up we have our first question, which is, which of the following fraudulent academic documents have you detected? We have forged or altered documents, fabricated counterfeit academic documents, falsified transcripts, certificates of bogus institution, or none at all. The question again is, which of the following fraudulent academic documents have you detected? Right. So we see a lot of persons have really, in fact, come across none of them at all. But then we've seen a tie or race sort of between the forged or altered documents. Right. I want to ask Mr. Mahili to tell me, how often do we really come across these fraudulent documents? Mr. Mahili?
I'm not sure if Dave is still here, but I can chime in. This is Julia.
Sorry, thank you. Go ahead. Yes.
So I would just say that we have, even if you don't know it, you've probably encountered fraudulent documents. So I think the key word in this poll is detected. There are times when we detect them, but there are also times when we don't. A very good Photoshop and online practices certainly ensure that people can do all kinds of things. And other than going directly to the institutional database, it can be oftentimes impossible to detect the fraud that occurs. It's not as basic as it used to be. There's a lot more tools at a fraudster's hands to falsify and create forged documents.
All right. Thank you so much for that answer. Mr. Christian, we move on to the next question. So our next question is, which of the following areas have you detected fraud? Personal information, institution seal, emblem, signatures, grades or grades on transcript, dates, level of award, discrepancies between documents provided. All right, you're again reminded that the link for the questions are inside the chat. Again, the question says, which of the following areas have you detected fraud? I would say most persons so far have indicated discrepancies between documents provided. But what documents, I'd want to ask? Mr. Mahaley or Ms. Fanaki, you're asked to open your camera and your mic to give us a response based on the results that we're seeing here.
All right, I have that I can't open my camera right now, but I will absolutely go ahead and speak to this. So usually if you've seen one of these, you've seen multiple ones of these. For instance, a level of award and the grades on the transcript are also go off in our hand in glove, as we would say. You know, somebody doesn't give themselves an award, and fraudsters are often not humble in their grading on their transcripts, so they don't give themselves marginal grades. And a lot of times what will raise a flag to us is discrepancies between the documents that are provided. And we've even seen this when we've asked for further documentation and we've gotten something a little bit different. Years ago, I had a case from China where I was looking at a credential for medicine and the transcript. And I said something about there was a particular subject missing, and I got another transcript with that subject inserted, but in a completely different font. And so that is obviously an alteration. And so sometimes fraudsters are very good at what they do, very highbrow and very thorough in their fonts and in their images and such, and sometimes they're not. So it's all just being really that due diligence. And as David pointed out in the presentation, knowing what a document actually should look like versus what you receive. And sometimes that's just doing a search of show me images of documents from X institution, and all of a sudden you see it looks nothing like what you have in front of you. So I think all of these are areas that putting these pieces together. One issue is a flag, but when you start to have multiple issues, signatures, if you look up to say, who was the registrar at this institution at the time this person studied, and it doesn't match the signature of the registrar on the document, that's a red flag. And then you see the dates that don't match up. All those things combined together make for a much more robust case of you need to really look further and get verification.
I see. Thank you so much. Our final question for this morning, for this morning's poll rather. How does your organization verify the academic credentials presented by job applicants? Again, how does your organization verify the academic credentials presented by job applicants? We have contact the institution, research the institution on the internet, ask the applicant for a certified transcript, and finally, ask the applicant to get a statement, right? So again, you're invited to participate in our polls right now, and the link again is in the chat. Ms. Funaki, I want to know how important it is. Of course, we know it is important, but I want to know how important is it for these employers to verify the credentials of their applicants.
That's a very important step, and it's oftentimes overlooked. And it's overlooked for a number of reasons. One of the ones that I hear the most often is, we're just so busy, we don't have the time to do that, which this is just fundamental, right? This is just, and there are agencies that will do this. Verify and degree check organizations that will do this for an employer. But it is, you see it over and over again where there's something there that just doesn't make sense. And this is particularly true with agencies, and I've seen it a lot with government agencies actually in the United States, where, you know, by the time they can hire somebody, they're so far behind that they're getting all these applications and trying to go through, and they might call references, but they tend to far less often verify documents with an institution. So I would say all of these options are important options for you to consider. Oftentimes you do more than one of these. You contact the institution and you research the institution. If an institution is a full-on diploma mill, I can guarantee you if you call that number on there, somebody's going to answer it. And a lot of times they'll have verification agencies associated with them, and they'll have credential evaluation. It's a whole ring of fraud. So really it's important to do your own research on the institution itself. You know, use multiple sources, go to primary sources for that country. You know, a certified translation is a good tool, but it's not the only tool. And if there's a fake document, you can bet that a high level of fraud is going to have a fraudulent certified translation. So all of these together are sort of your best defense to use more than one of these options.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you all for participating. Thank you, Mr. Christian, for assisting with this process. Dr. Brown, back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Murray, and thanks again, everyone, for your participation in that. Very insightful as well. What a very rich morning we have been having. All right, and the richness doesn't stop here. It continues now with our second session, which carries the theme, Fighting Credential Fraud. As shared with you earlier, in this session, we'll be looking at this theme from two perspectives. We're going to consider the examiner's perspective and the institution's perspective. We are going to get started, though, with the examiner's perspective. And before I introduce our two speakers for this segment, I want again to invite you, please, to note your questions in the Q&A section of the platform. All right, we want to hear your questions so we can continue to enrich the discourse. So our two presenters for this segment are Dr. Nicole Manning, Director of Operations, Examination Services with the Caribbean Examination Council, and Ms. Margaret Harris, Records and Information Officer with the Overseas Examination Commission. But before I invite Dr. Manning to speak and Ms. Harris, I want to tell you a little bit about them. So Dr. Manning, she possesses a Doctor of Education in Organization Leadership from the Nova Southern Eastern University in Florida, and a Master of Science in Computer-Based Management Information Systems, and a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry and Management. A very rich academic background. Dr. Manning, though, is an industry professional with over 20 years of regional and international managerial experience in diverse industries, from test development and measurement to quality assurance and strategic management. Dr. Manning's extensive experience in the fields of education and assessment have equipped her with the necessary tools to strategically manage the development of examination services, which are delivered by the Examinations Development and Production and Examinations Administration and Security Departments. And Ms. Margaret Harris As indicated earlier, she works with the Overseas Examinations Commission as Records and Information Officer. And she has been employed with the Commission since 2007 in this capacity. She too brings a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge she gained from working in the private and public sectors for over 20 years. Ms. Harris' post-secondary education is in marketing, general management, records management, and public administration. So we welcome both of our presenters and ask Dr. Nicole Manning to start us off.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brown. I'm not sure that, just give me a nod if you're hearing me well. Okay, as well as seeing the presentation in presentation mode. Is it in presentation mode? Just want to confirm.
No, it's not.
No.
Okay, all right, just let me fix that.
All right, it's in,
Wait,
we're
I'm
seeing the
going to
presenter.
Yes, I'm going to swap it a bit. Just a second, sorry about that. My apologies, just a second. All right, I'm not sure if okay, all right, it's coming up now, my apologies. Okay, so you should be seeing the presentation now, confirm?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, so good morning again, everyone. Thank you to the University Council of Jamaica for the invitation. And as I move into this presentation, one of the most important things for us to note is the fact that together as educators, we are going to not only fight credential fraud and diploma mills, but we are going to win. And with that positive outlook, the Caribbean Examinations Council, we would like to share a few points and in terms of how we would have been able over the years to treat with this particular situation. But I want first to give an overview of the presentation. I'll give a little background. I know most persons know about the Caribbean Examinations Council, but I'll go straight into that, to looking at the credentialing facility that we have in place and how we would have been managing fraud detection. And more so, as we do move towards our digital transformation, where I'm going to give you what we would have been doing in terms of battling or fighting that particular situation. So we have a 50-year track record. And as we have moved from the 1970s now into the 2020s, I want to, just to note that a lot of our services, a lot of what we are currently and actively facilitating and moving towards, treating with more in an electronic space. And if COVID has taught us nothing, it has taught us that we need to make sure that we can create this level of flexibility. And also to ensure that we can respond. Now, of course, we are not all in the same space. And so we also have to work with our stakeholders and engage them to ensure that they too are moving towards this digital transformation that is required in this 21st century. And the digital transformation, of course, for our 2020s will allow us to fight and prevent a lot of what is happening in relation to the credential fraud, sorry, my apologies, and diploma bills. So let me go first to speak about the credentialing facility that we have in place. So the Caribbean Examinations Council, we issue what we call preliminary slips as first and foremost. So whether you're doing, it is the level of a CSEC, or it is the advanced proficiency examinations, CAPE, or even our associate degrees, diplomas, whichever one, we do issue our preliminary slips. And these preliminary slips, of course, in the paper-based as we are operating now, it does augur well in terms of providing that what we would probably call preliminary certification for our candidates as they seek to begin the matriculation process for higher education. We also subsequent provide certificates, actual hard copy certificates, and I'm going to speak a bit more about that. We do amendment to our certificates, we do replace certificates, and we do certificate verification. A little error there, and transcripts. Now, what is critical to note is, as I'm sampling on screen, is that we have what is called a student portal. So we do have a portal that provides preliminarily to the candidate, as in synonymous with the preliminary slips, their results. So when we release results, preliminary and initially, candidates can see their results on screen. The matter of credential fraudulent activity actually starts here, because we do have situations where candidates would go in and, well, let me not say candidates, there is some level of fraudulent activity taking place even at this level. So I'll just start by showing you first our student portal. So on the left is a picture of our student portal, what it looks like. Of course, we would have blocked the information because it's live data from candidates. In the middle, you have a sample of 3 of our certificates, and I'll speak a bit more about that because we, of course, would have had some improvements in that area. And to the right, you're seeing our transcript. Now, as it is, we would have had and would have been exposed, of course, unfortunately, as it would have been mentioned by our previous speaker, the whole fact and matter of the fact that, you know, this has gotten so much prominence. The whole matter of credential frauds and diploma bills have gotten so much prominence. And of course, there's even an acronym that is used, diploma, for diploma scams, DIP scam. Sometimes if you do your Google search and so on. And this is evidence that, of course, there is some level of frequency, a high level of frequency and experience that we're having here. That would have caused for you even to have an acronym. It doesn't happen like that. And this is something that's happening across the world. And as our previous speaker mentioned, it is a global threat, actually. And it's a matter for us to look at as it affects us negatively in terms of our cross-border educational activities. And this is very critical and noteworthy for CXC. If I may even borrow from Avernum, an organization founded in 2013 that looks at digital identity crisis, that the diploma mills have almost devalued, in some cases, earned degrees. And it's only after the fact that employers have identified and realized that what they would have received are actual fraudulent activities, look-alikes, sound-alikes. Sometimes it confuses the public, it confuses various groups of stakeholders. So it beholds the examining bodies and awarding bodies like CXC to ensure that we have that conversation. Another point I want to note is that we, of course, having not escaped this, we would have had situations where, as I noted before, even our preliminary results on the student portal, we would have seen where persons make adjustments to those. So we do have universities submitting and querying what's happening here. For the certificates also, we see forgeries detecting in terms of even the formatting, signature issues, some of what our previous speaker would have mentioned. We do have minimal reports from this because the transcripts, in terms of transcripts, because those go directly to employers and also institutions. For the most part, where we have the report is where we have verification. So where we have from an embassy or otherwise seeking to do their verifications, that is at the point in time when you actually are able to identify that fraudulent activities would have taken place. Now, in addition to the verification, we do our own search and we see it on social media. We have done our own investigation because, of course, CXC is affected in a little different way. We have situations where fraudsters are trying to go after us even from development of examinations perspective. And it is something that we have to manage well. And when I say that, I want to be very clear that if it is that persons would want to try and access, because access papers, access certificates, and try and make adjustments to them, not to the papers, but more so to the certificates. Now, we, over the last 3 years, would have seen a small amount in terms of our CSEC qualifications, as you're seeing on screen, very small amount over the last 3 years. And this may have been because we have started on a road that may have been announced to our public in terms of our e-certification, which I speak about, but also I do believe COVID may have had some impact where this is concerned. For the Cape, we have not identified any cases of that so far. So in social media, we actively see where you see credentials for sale, literally, as I'm showing you on screen. On Facebook, I'm showing you examples of what we are seeing out there. And so CXC has to ensure that we had a response to this fraud that we were detecting. So we do public notice to our stakeholders. We generally share standard notices prior to investigation and just on an ongoing basis. We also have canned responses in terms of verification of the fraud. So we will, of course, I'm sharing a few of the how we start and what are some of the canned responses that we would actually share in terms of when we have this fraud identified. Now, to go a little bit more in terms of how it affects us, we see falsification and of the physical certificates. I think it was, I'm trying to remember which one of the persons in terms of our previous speaker would have mentioned the signatories. This is a very important point for our higher education institutions to look out for. It's something we have seen, and it is something that happens. The logo, that's another point that persons go after, and of course, usually make a lot of mistakes. You look for the foil seal, you look for formatting, you look for serial numbers. And this is, of course, very important that we understand. I'm sharing with you how we reduce the capability of falsification. And that is done through the increased security features. So you will remember those of us who would have done our exams years ago, you would have had a landscaped certificate that would have been issued. You notice that the logo, it would have been to the bottom left-hand corner. And as we move and increase the security features, one of the way also that is very important is not only to change the shape of the certificate, but also we enhance the features, some of the features I mentioned earlier in terms of the foiled seal, things like that would have been added. Then, of course, we move to a more embedded seal. And on my far right, not only the embedded seal, but you're also seeing the change in even the logo, the color of the logo. So these are things that we share with our stakeholders, and it is something that is done on an ongoing basis. But we do have increased security features as we make the transition. Now, as we embark in the digital age, I want to share with you where CXC is moving towards a digital transformation. So we have created And as we would have started in 2015 and more so moving forward in 2021, as we shared in our new strategic plan, we are looking to do a full digital transformation, but we are not leaving our stakeholders behind. And that digital transformation would have started from e-learning, what we call e-learning, to our EQ bank, that's the e-authoring of items in a digital space. We already have online registration and we do e-testing, but of course we are embarking on more of that. We do on-screen marking, and of course, all our paper-based exams are scanned. And of course, we're looking towards e-grading in a more with artificial intelligence assisted analytics. But for the focus of this presentation, we are looking at e-results, e-certificates, as well as e-transcripts. So when we had the COVID pandemic, one of the biggest and quick changes we made would have been in relation to transcripts. We moved from the paper-based transcripts to the electronic transcripts, and we worked with our stakeholders, we worked with the credentialing bodies across the world, where we would have had transcripts being sent to them in a physical mode. Now, of course, none of this can be done unless we look at the full suite of what we offer. The links you see in this puzzle is telling you that as we move to this transformation, we are seeking to have, of course, an integrated system with our stakeholders. So one of the key points you're going to hear me speak about will be about our technology. So while technology may facilitate the breach, as you would have heard earlier, it also can assist with the prevention of fraudulent credentialing. It is also important to note that as we move towards this e-certification that I mentioned, what is also important is the digital identity that we need to have for our candidates. Now, of course, we do have a unique candidate number that is utilized. And so the digital identity can help us to fight and prevent credential frauds and ultimately change the way we even share information in social media. We ambitiously kicked off the first regional blockchain-based credential project in October 2018 by issuing e-certificates to a select group of 24,000 candidates who sat the 2018 May-June examinations from Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago. Now we push ahead, having learned from that, to create our complete digital infrastructure, and specifically regarding e-certification as we are speaking. Key to note is that all information in this discussion that we'll have is related to the users having control exclusively, the owners having control over their certificates, as well as CXC, as we protect their digital identity. So e-certification will help with the use of a blockchain technology to prevent credential fraud. There are many benefits to this. You have, of course, the improved efficiency. Now we, as I mentioned before, we issue preliminary results. We have preliminary slips, and of course, candidates get their results in that way initially. Then it takes some time, of course, for them to get what the next phase of the certificates that they have to send to the universities. Now, CXC in the past and current, I should say, would have entered into many what we call memorandum of understanding, as well as agreements, to see if we can efficiently share information for candidates with universities directly. Candidates, however, will have to, they currently give approval to the universities to access their certificates. So we have to get that proof from the universities that they have gotten that approval. So you can see that there are some timelines there that we have to adhere to. There are some, of course, delays that's going to happen in terms of matriculation. So we do believe that the e-certificates, as we are embarking on creating that full suite, will improve efficiency. It will provide that level of ownership. It's very important to note that we'll have increased security. I mentioned the prevention of fraud, no delays, it will be free of cost, and of course, globally accessible. So as I look at each of these, I want to note for the first, improved efficiency. We'll have no middle person required to send or verify to an for the e-certificate. You own it, you send it. It is the power in the hand of the owner. And so as we look at the improved efficiency, we want to also strengthen and look more at how we empower our candidates to own their own records and have them verify the records as they have it in terms of sharing with educators for further education as well as employment. Increased security. I'm going to say some more about the ownership, but let me go to increased security. Records are, of course, increasingly more secure. And even as we embark on this, we are looking at best practices as they exist in the European Union. We look at best practices as it exists in what we call the self-sovereignty of identity, the same digital identity I spoke about, and of course, tamper-proof. The digital certificate on a blockchain technology, which is very important, of course, helps in terms of the tamper-proof, the existence of a tamper-proof certification. It's of course preventing the fraud in terms of low imitation of records from CXC with the cryptographic signatures, which is what the blockchain technology offers. The immediate share, as I mentioned, and last but not least, a little bit more on the global accessibility, the fact that it is secure, portable, valid digital certificates that is shareable globally. Now, a little bit more on the blockchain technology. We are creating this homogeneous ecosystem based on the blockchain, which guarantees the reliable authentication of the credentials. It's an amalgamating of the credentialing. So we're pulling everything together in one place. I want to also speak a little bit more about the importance of the blockchain technology. As I speak of the ownership, students, of course, we understand the fact that we are tending to candidates of different age groups. We have candidates that are over 18, but we do have candidates that we're working with that are under 18. And so the private and ownership of the certificates to the issuer and the recipient, we have to look at it in two ways. We have to look at it for the students over 18. So those students over 18 will have that direct access, but the ones that are under 18, given the legal and regulatory framework within which we operate, and which of course we do on a daily basis or any additional research that is necessary, we have to look at and engage our parents and guardians. Those who will use the CXC app, of course, we have to engage our parents and guardians as they manage the credentials. The profile and the distinctions among the students over and under 18 years old will have to be, it's something that we are working on, and it is something that we have to ensure that all of it is being pulled together in a very real way. We will, of course, have to do a lot of communication, a lot of stakeholder engagement. We found it even through our pilot, or initial pilot, I should say, because we're going to have several phases, that in doing our first engagement for the various groups, that given the feedback, it is even more important to utilize what we have as our unique candidate number. That will, of course, help us in terms of this digital identity. I want to also emphasize that the blockchain technology will, of course, assist us in terms of the prevention of loss of official records. You know, from time to time, I'm speaking to the converted here probably, in terms of the loss of official records. Now, because it exists within this kind of technology and on this platform, we will see, and we are expecting, that we will no longer have this as an issue. With, of course, I mentioned the strong cryptography that is expected. It will provide a new security infrastructure. So that's why it's important to look at all the blocks together. It, of course, guarantees the authenticity of the records. And I want to pause here to note a few things. One, we will continue to maintain a valid database of all the students' data. We may, of course, a valid database of all needed parent and guardian data. That is going to be important for us as we move forward for the persons under 18. This is going to be critical for the parents and guardians in relation to managing the data and managing the certification for the students, candidates in their charge. I want to also note that we will continue to provide a registration mechanism for the registration of students, validation of their information, and assignment of the digital identity that I previously mentioned. So in guaranteeing the authenticity of the records, we have to look at quite a few and bits of biodata that has to be provided, most of which we already have. So overall, as everything sits here, it will be an independent verification that will be facilitated. The CXC, the Caribbean Examinations Council, looks forward as we move forward and look at the prevention of credential frauds and the diploma mills that exist. We don't want to just sit and understand that there is a problem. We want to respond as we would have done in the past, even in the changes as they exist in our certificates, the paper-based certificates. As we move towards digital transformation, we also want to do more. And this, we believe, the e-certification on the blockchain technology will not only provide all those benefits I noted for our stakeholders, for our candidates, parents, and guardians. It will also help the higher education institutions in terms of matriculation. It will also give that greater level of confidence to our employers also that this certificate provided through this methodology is valid. So colleagues, I want to pause there and facilitate any questions as we move forward together in this realm. So thank you for your attention.
And we want to say thank you very much, Dr. Manning. We certainly were kept at the edge of our seats with such a passionate and authentic presentation. But the questions, we're going to hold them on a little longer, and we are going to move right over to Miss Margaret Harris. Miss Harris, please.
Good morning. I have a co-presenter, Mr. Tanjay Holmes, and he will start off the presentation as it relates to the administration of examination issues, and then I'll take up as it relates to the fraudulent certificate issues. Mr. Holmes.
Good morning, everyone. I am Tanjay Holmes, as Ms. Harris said earlier. I am an examinations officer, responsible for CSEC and CBQ at the Overseas Exams Commission. Yes. So just a little bit about the Overseas Examinations Commission. We're a public body that was formed out of an act of Parliament, and we are a parent, we're a our parent ministry is the Ministry of Education. So in 2005, by an act of parliament, the Overseas Examinations Commission was established. But we existed long before 2005. We are about 180 something years old, 130 years old. Yes, so we existed long before. So we have been in this business quite a bit of time. So we are the strategic outcome of the history and evolution of our predecessor entities through the years and since 1887, guided by our core values of integrity, reliability, innovation, and efficiency. As most persons would know, that we were seen in the marketplace as a proctoring body. Our mission is to efficiently and effectively administer access to examinations and provide applicable accompanying support services with the highest level of integrity while being sensitive to the needs of our customers. Again, we are positioned as a global entity for examinations administration. We administer exams for quite a number of different examining bodies, and Ms. Harris will speak to the different examining bodies that we administer exams for.
Secondary level, based on our legislation, the OEC Act states that we must keep permanent records for specific examinations at the secondary level. To this end, we have records for all these examining bodies that you are now seeing on the screen, as Associate Examining Board, Cambridge, CXC, GC London, Royal Society of Arts, the London Chamber of Commerce, Southern Examining Group, Union of Lancashire, and Cheshire Institute. All these bodies we have for examinations records for, and we are bound to keep them based on the legislation that governs our existence today. We also offer a lot of post-secondary examinations. You see the list there. It's a long list of over 72 institutions worldwide that we do proctoring for. So we have several institutions under our command. There are certain security measures that we have to put in place in order to offer these institution examinations. And so Mr. Holmes, being the person for examination, he will just outline to you briefly what these are.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. In terms of exams administration, we are governed, or we follow protocols based on the different examining bodies. So Ms. Harris spoke about the over 72 international examining bodies that we proctor exams for. All 72 examining bodies, they have different protocols or different regulations under which we have to administer their examinations. Our biggest local or regional client is CXC, and Dr. Manning just spoke earlier, and CXC too has their own regulation or requirements for us by which we have to adhere to in terms of administering their exams. So in terms of prior to the exam, during the exam, and post-exam, there are regulations that we must follow in order to maintain the security of the exam from start to certification. So verification and identification of candidates is one of the areas that most examining bodies focus on in terms of the administration of the exams. As the Overseas Examinations Commission, we have to ensure that the person who is sitting the exam is that person that is duly registered to sit the exams. And so in terms of doing that, We have to conduct training with our invigilators, our supervisors, as it relates to ensuring that the person who enters the exam room, who is sitting in the exam room, the checking of timetables, the checking of City and Guilds calls it the certificate, it's a registration certificate. Also, we focus on spacing of candidates as a measure of security. But we also have candidates who sit as what we call out of center. And so when a candidate sits as an out of center, we have to ensure that once the candidate sits as an out of center, the candidate is quarantined. So the candidate is not, once the candidate finishes a particular paper and is supposed to move to the next exam, that candidate has no access to the persons who sat the exams before. So that candidate is quarantined until they get to the exam room. So self-examination, we have self-body patting, pocket turnout, and that's for mostly for the international exams. We also have body scan, again for the international exams, the post-secondary exams. We have misconduct and irregularity reports, and that we must complete, or we should complete, in the event that there are misconducts or irregularities during the exam. Also, reports must be completed at the end of the exam, and we also have some level of documentation that we have to provide to the examining bodies after the exam, should there be any misconduct or irregularities that happen during the exam. As it relates to our computer-based exams, we offer quite a number of computer-based exams, and since COVID, that has been the way forward for a lot of our international post-secondary exams. One of our biggest clients in terms of computer-based exams is ACCA, and ACCA, they are very strict in terms of cyber risk management by design. So we have to ensure that our firewall environment is on point or on par with what their requirements. We have to have a dedicated physical server, not a virtual server. We also have to ensure endpoint protection software are in place. And there are some rooms that we have here that candidates sit exams in, that I would say that when they get into the room, they are very intimidated because the number of cameras that the examining body requires, cameras are positioned from all angles. So a fully monitored camera. We also have some examining bodies that they require access to our camera system so they can tap into our system and access and view the candidates, even though we have our own set of security measures and we are following the regulations. They also require access to our camera system that they can tap in and view their candidates to see if we are following the procedures or the regulations as stipulated by the examining body. And Ms. Iris will come back and just finish off the certification part of the presentation.
Okay, so based on what Mr. Holmes just said, the security features that are in place for the examinations, now it comes to this part, and as you would have heard from early presenter, this is a certificate stage where both the examining bodies and ourselves as an administrative body has no control over once the certificates are issued. The certificate you are seeing on the screen is one of the older CXC certificate, and there is an older GCE Cambridge certificate as well with a red border and has some amount of green color in the background. Those are the most popular certificates that persons in the fraudulent certification business tend to use, because these older certificates are more of a cardboard type and they don't have a lot of the security features that you would have heard Dr. Manning spoke about earlier embedded in them. And so they are much easier to reproduce. Not that they don't make any attempts on those, because the more technology those persons have access to, the more attempt is made and the more expensive, based on what the feedback we get here, they charge to reproduce the fake in those, the fake copies for those certificates. So for example, this one and the one that I just described that is not on screen, those certificates belong to a particular era. And so one of the red flag for you recruiters should be a person in a particular age group should not have these certificates because it belongs to a past era. So unless you have mature candidates, you shouldn't see any of these coming in. Another thing that is popular to fake is the preliminary result slips, because those are much easier to fake. And what another a word of guideline is that you should not be seeing anybody who did exam for more than 3 to 4 months with a preliminary result slips, because by then most of the examining bodies, unless there's another issue, would have issued their certificates. And so these are things that you need to look out for. Some of the other things that you will see on these documents are wrong subject names. We have several examining bodies at the secondary level. CXC is the most prominent one these days, but you still have others in the market that offer a smaller amount of certification locally. What they will do, for example, they will use a CXC name, for example, the computer studies. Some certificates, CXC designation would be different from a Cambridge designation. So they will use a wrong subject name. CXC English should be different from what GC call their English. And so these are things that you can look out for. Wrong grading scheme, they might be using certificate A, and on that certificate, they'll have A, B, and C, when that's the issuing body for that certificate does not use that grading scheme. And so they will have 1, 2, and 3 for another examining body that don't use that. Wrong signatures, this is a little more difficult for you on the outside to detect, because you don't know who signed the certificates. We on the inside, we are better able to detect those things. But some of the things that you will see on it see on those certificates are wrong signatures. So they will have the registrar or the chairperson or the PSR, whoever is responsible for signing such document, they have the wrong ones. Wrong center code, wrong font size, some big, some small. The same certificate have various different font size, wrong spelling, wrong profiles. So they will have a straight A profiles that does match up with the actual grade and things like that. What we suggest, when you are in doubt, you accept those certificates for initial processing, but you investigate before you admit. Just this week when I was preparing for this presentation, a major entity called, because what she was presented with was certificate from university, CSEC, and CAPE certificates, but there were quite a number of spelling errors on the CXC certificate. There were things with the profiles that were wrong, and the center code and all of those things were just not matching up. So always investigate before you admit persons with those documents. Request that the applicant submit a transcript. We offer a transcript service here as well, and you can request that they offer a transcript. In that event, it will be of no cost to you, and the fact that the applicant comes in and asks us to prepare that transcript what will happen is that we will send it directly to you. So apart from requesting it, they have no interaction with the document. And you do not use them for final acceptance into your programs or for employment if you are in doubt. So we have what is called a verification request. And in this case, the employer or the admission person will make the request. A lot of persons come to us for verification requests at a very late stage. They tend to come after they employ these people. There is embezzlement of fund issues, or they are trying to promote them and they might have lost the documents, as one of the presenters spoke to earlier on. The fact that they don't have anything on the file now, they come to ask us for things, or they may have things on the file, but when they ask us for further information, what is resubmitted is not adding up with what they have on the files. So a verification request is a request made by an organization to the OEC for verification, which is a statement of examination result. This can be done for both prospective and current employees, students, and other interest groups. So both the admission officers in the tertiary institutions and the employment personnel may want to come to us to get a copy of a verification request. Because it is a personal document, there are some amount of procedure that you need to follow. And one of them that I will put emphasis on, permission from the applicant. The best time for you to ask for the permission from the applicant for you to do a background check is at the initial stage when they are trying to enter your organization. Once they come inside the organization, you tend to have difficulty getting that permission request. And we can't issue you with those results because it is personal information and we can't breach the client privacy to issue you with those. Once you have that permission from the applicant in place, you need a letter addressed to the executive director. It must be on your company letterhead. The letter must be signed by a senior member of your organization, depending on the type of organization you're operating. The letter must be affixed with company seal or stamp, information or copy of the certificate or the preliminary results slip or the relevant section of the resume that would have outlined what is it that the person's, the qualification they said they have. That is what you need to place to give us. So you don't have to send the entire resume because we're not interested in that. Just the major information that would help us to conduct the search of our database to see if this person has the qualification that they are saying they have. And if they are actually a part of our database, because sometimes they are not. And persons are so brazen that every year that the police does their recruiting, they will come here with a number of certificates that they would have collected from persons who are trying to join the force that are fraudulent. The transcript is a statement of result usually requested by the candidate, and we encourage persons to use this because it will come at no cost to the institution if you allow the client to come in and request it from us. So in this case, you don't have an issue with payment and adding to your cost of recruitment and all of that, because they will pay and we will send the transcript directly to your institution. What is required to request a transcript? They simply walk into our office on any given day, complete the transcript application form. They must be the owner of the result for them to complete the transcript application form, or they must authorize someone to come in and do it on their behalf. the transcript versus the verification process. The candidate requests the transcript directly. The candidate owns these results. The candidate complete the transcript form, but the results are sent directly to the entity who need to have that document verified. For verification requests, the request by an organization, permission must be granted, request must be done in writing, request for use by the organization. So when you request it, it's for your use, but the client has to give you the permission to do so. And our offices, we have two offices. We have a satellite office at 18 Queens Drive in Montego Bay, and our office here at 6 Manhattan Road in Kingston. And any fraudulent matters are reported to the police. Once you come in with a fraudulent document, we'll have to engage the police because it is considered a fraud. And so we expect that the institutions who detect such things will do likewise, because we'll have to protect the integrity of the institutions that grant these certification, and we cannot allow the persons who are committing these fraud to get ahead of us. There are persons who will even be on the street that are selling these things to the candidates, and what they'll tell them is that they have a connection in CXC or at overseas exams, and based on this presentation, you would know that we don't process any documentation here. And so they will come and say they'll tell them that they have these documentation. They can provide them with these documentation because they have a link, and Jamaicans like to hear that they can get a link. And so they'll pay money, and I was told that the payment you make is based on whether you want to have an A, a B, or a 1 or a 2. The higher the grading that you get is the more money you'll pay for these certification. I have come to the end of the presentation, and I await your questions.
So Ms. Harris and Mr. Holmes, thank you so very much. The chat is lighting up with excellent presentations. So I too would add my bit to that and to echo that sentiment. Thank you both so very much. We are going to leave our questions, colleagues, in the interest of time for when we finish the other segment and we hear from the other presenters who are going to be addressing fighting credential fraud, but now from the perspective of the institutions. But again, both to Dr. Manning, Ms. Harris, and Mr. Holmes, we say thank you so very much for two excellent presentations. So we're going to move right ahead now to hearing from our other presenters on the institution's perspective. Colleagues, the bios for our remaining presenters, Mr. Devon Case, Dr. Gloria Gregory, and Ms. Anne Lodge, Mr. Clayton Moore, and Dr. Marsha Morgan Allen. Their bios are in your programs, so I won't take up any time to share any of that with you, but to encourage you, if you haven't already looked at it, to do so a little later. So we're going to move right ahead, and we are going to ask our presenters to start off and to keep the order of presentations in keeping with the program. So first, we'll hear from Mr. Case, and then he'll be followed by Dr. Gregory, then Ms. Lodge, then Mr. Moore, and then Dr. Morgan Allen. All right, so we move right ahead to Mr. Case. And as we said before, please put your questions in the Q&A section. And certainly as time permits, we'll seek to address as many of them as we can at the end of these 5 presentations. Mr. Case, we turn over to you.
Hey, good morning, Dr. Brown. Good morning, colleagues. I must say thanks to the UCJ for hosting these engaging and interesting sessions. I am also grateful for the opportunity to participate and more so to be able to join in the conversation regarding credential fraud and diploma mills in the digital environment. Now, I'll be sharing from the case perspective, so I will not speak too much about what was said earlier on. And I must say that I particularly appreciate the discussion earlier on this morning from our international partners. And so my presentation this morning, I look at 3 aspects. I'm going to look at how we go about authenticating our matriculation documents. I'm going to look at what we refer to as the need for establishing some protocols with our partner institutions. How do we interact, especially as we engage students from different institutions? And we also want to share one of what we refer to as identifying a breach and implementing corrective measures. So those are the 3 areas I want to look at in the minutes that we have to share. Now, by way of a definition, a working definition that we've been using here is that we refer to credential fraud as the use of false or deceptive academic documents to access or engage in admissions, enrollment, employment, or other related services. So I trust you will work with that as we go through this particular presentation. Now, you would agree with me that evidence as well as widespread suspicion, and I use the word suspicion, suggests that credential fraud is very real and it is creatively employed by a variety of individuals for varying reasons. Now, I'll share intimately what happened in our case and what we've done in our way of treating with that. So as our institution operates, our primary source for matriculation comes from CXC, CSEC subjects. So over 80% of our student intake is generally based on CXC results. The other percentage, we have hard trust certifications, we have prior learning assessment. We also use students coming in from other higher education institutions pursuing postgraduate studies. But by and large, our greater numbers are undergrads. So CXC results tend to be our major source. Now, we heard from CXC just now. So just joining this part of the conversation, I'm a little bit excited after listening to their policies and protocols. So if you look at this example I'm sharing now, you might not see all the text very clearly, but for example, would have received a preliminary script or a result with a student having achieved 9 subjects. And when we request that each student, what we've done so far to ensure that we manage this process is that the students must apply for a transcript that is sent directly from the Overseas Examinations Commission. But when we cross-check, we always check to make sure that when we're upgrading our database, the information is accurate with the final document. Now, in this case, the student indeed did 9 subjects, but on this transcript, we only have 1 pass. So these are some of the things we have to be checking on to ensure that while we are flexible, especially in this digital age where what we've employed is that we ask the students for ease of access and for speedy processing that they give us permission to access their preliminary results directly from the student portal. Then we ask them now to apply for the transcript for verification. And we also call into CXC when we identify any other challenges or any suspicion that we may pick up, we try to reach out to them. So that's one of the major things that we have looked into. As it relates to other institutions, we generally require and depend on transcripts and the certificates that the students present to us. Now, there's a challenge that we've discovered with that too. One of the challenges with that particular situation is how we verify when we find certain challenges or certain discrepancies. So we are suggesting that we foster diplomatic relations between institutions. How do we work together especially for those coming in for postgraduate studies. The fraudsters are becoming more creative, so the institutions need to also up their game in terms of creativity. Now, we're suggesting, I don't know what the legal ramifications may be surrounding this, but we're suggesting that we look at implementing policies that will facilitate the verification of documents between legal entities and or academic institutions void of the student's written consent. We know that might be a challenge, but this is a suggestion where our colleagues in this conversation may have ways to suggest how we may work around that. Now, we're suggesting that once a student has presented a certificate or a transcript from an institution, that this should be construed as their agreement to facilitate the verification of their document. That's just one of the recommendations that we're looking at also. Now, the interesting one for us that I want to get to is, you have identified a breach. What do you do next? In our case, we have heard of certificate frauds. I don't have any evidence of it. And just like our partners other institutions, the body of research suggests that people do these fraudulent activities for employment, sometimes for promotion, sometimes just for massaging their ego and so on. In our case, since the massification of the work and travel programs, that's where we've encountered our biggest challenge, where our offices have been bombarded with transcript requests and status letter requests. Now, these students are very creative, and as we heard from our CXC partners, the students are willing to pay more money for the fraudulent documents than the actual documents. For example, we were doing transcripts for $600 and students were paying $3,000 and above to get their documents adjusted by other students or other fraudsters. So we have to think about how to manage this particular process. Now, it's very interesting. I hope you'll be able to see. So some of the things that they would do, they would copy the stamp, and we usually have stamps that are utilized across departments. So we've had to change that to have specific stamps for transcripts and so on. They would also try to copy what we would have on the transcript. They are not able to align it properly because these are generated systematically. They are not able to calculate the GPAs or the grade points, but they'll do this because to get the work and study program, what they need is to be able to convince the embassy that they are duly registered and they are performing well. So they should be having no less than 12 credits and their GPA should be at a certain point. So they'll always modify these documents and they will manufacture signatures and put the dates incorrectly and stuff like that. Now, what we suggest is that institutions begin to look at the value of the risk, measure the risk, look at what you might need to invest in terms of corrective measures. So what we did, once we were contacted by the US Embassy for a lot of verifications, we decided to increase our charge, change the stamps, ensure that our documents are sealed. And then we also decided to invest in different kinds of papers. So we've been using void secure papers. And we have sole manufacturers, sole providers, so we ensure that we keep these things tight and well secured in office, so nobody outside of the office has access to this particular security paper. Now, this would mean that our cost would be affected, so we have had to increase the cost. But if the students are willing to pay the fraudsters $3,000, then if we increase our price by 100%, it would still be below and would be able to foot the bill for managing the risk. So we ask that institutions begin to look at how to invest in managing the risk. So those are two of the incidences that we encountered that I would love to share with us in terms of the case perspective. And as I said earlier, people will do these kinds of frauds for varying reasons. It could be for employment. It could just be for getting your visa to go on the work and study program, as we've encountered. The truth is, the moment we implemented this particular void secure paper, the embassy was able to identify at least a dozen fraudulent documents in just 1 week. And since then, the numbers have drastically reduced. So this is one of the wins that we decided we would share in terms of fighting fraud. Our partners, the Council of Community Colleges of Jamaica, CCCJ, we work closely together. They too have up to their game in terms of their security features of certificates. And as a result of that, we are also hearing less rumors and we're not seeing much of any evidence surrounding fraudulent documents. So I want to encourage us as we continue to ensure and to assure quality that we maintain credibility by reinforcing best practices. So I'm really grateful for this conversation, looking at some of the best practices that we can employ. And I hope that the one we shared, you may have found it interesting and you might be able to employ it if you have not yet done so. And we just want to say again, thanks to UCJ for managing these sessions and allowing us to share in this kind of conversation. With that, I say thank you.
And thank you to Mr. Case for a quality presentation, short and sweet. So let's move right along to Dr. Gloria Gregory.
Good morning, colleagues, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you from Northern Caribbean University. I will just share my slides with you at this time. Okay. Sorry, just to get back to where I was. Okay, so this morning we are really grateful for the opportunity to share in this learning environment, the fight against credential fraud. Northern Caribbean University, and I'll just say a brief word about us. Northern Caribbean University was established in 1907, and it is a private liberal arts institution which is operated by the Jamaica Union Conference and the Atlantic Caribbean Union Mission of Seventh-day Adventists. And we offer degrees, a number of professional, pre-professional, and vocational programs. We have 3 sites, Kingston, Montego Bay, and Salem. I'm very grateful to be a part of this discussion. It was Sir Francis Bacon who said that knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. And we feel that as an institution, we need to be so alert and so afraid as to what is happening around us that we can actually be a part of this discussion. And so we have gone to the extent of educating ourselves as to what these frauds are so that we can best identify them. I recall when I once taught pathophysiology, before I could get into teaching of the pathophysiology for the respective systems, I had to first of all review the anatomy and physiology of the systems that we would be studying. And the reason for that is that the students would so well know the correct system that when there was an anomaly because of a disease process, it was easy to identify. And so this is the approach that Northern Caribbean University takes in identifying documents. We have looked at the definition already for credential fraud, but the thing that stands out with me is the unfair or dishonest advantage that some individuals gain as a result of these fraudulent documents. And in educating ourselves, we have looked quite a bit at the Guide to Bogus Institutions and Documents by Dr. Beer and his companions. And I'm not going to review all of these as we have done that over the past few days, and of course is today. So, but we take a good look at a transcript fraud, accreditation mills, diploma mills, secondary school credential fraud, fraudulent evaluation services, as sometimes they do contact us for information, and of course, bogus schools. So according to my feeling is that any fraudulent document accepted by any educational institution poses a threat to all of us. And this is why this discussion is so valuable as we talk together, because we're all affected, we're all together in this situation. So Northern Caribbean University has had a significant decline, let me say, as I was advised this morning, in the detection of these fraudulent documents. Within the past 3 to 5 years, we have had very few. And there's one case similar to Mr. Case that I will mention. And it was a suspicious looking CSEC document that was submitted to the office. Suspicious in the sense that it was obvious that a name had been replaced, and it was also obvious that there was tampering with the grades on the slip. I don't have the particular one to show, but that was it. So what did we do? We asked the applicant to submit the original transcript for us. And dare to say that we never received the document from the applicant, and in tandem, we did not accept the particular document because there was no verification of the qualifications for the program that the person was applying for. So we have learned to review documents with a forensic eye. That is a term that I like to use, because it is, once we know what the document should look like, then we're now able to actually identify when there is an anomaly in the document. So does a document bear a clear signature and name stamp? And I'm presenting this from both angles. When we are sending out documents from the institution, these are some of the questions that we answer for ourselves in sending out the documents. So when we're sending out documents and when we're receiving documents, does the document bear a clear signature and name stamp? Does the seal indicate the same name on the institution? When the document is held up to a light or to UV light, do we see any alterations? And are there handwritten alterations on the documents? Usually, maybe it's a computer-generated document, but what are the anomalies that we notice? Are the documents consistent with those previously received? Whenever we think that there might be an alteration in a document, then it's easy to find a reference point, and that is to refer to documents that have been submitted to us previously, and then to see if there are any differences in those documents. So we pay very keen attention to personal items, the birth dates. Do they coincide with what the person is presenting to us? Are there smudges and erases? Are there inconsistencies in fonts, text, layout, symmetry of the document? And are there absence or alliterations in the institutional seal, as was brought out earlier in the presentations? And do we observe any alterations in lines? Because the document is not lined or lined up properly according to the alteration that is being made. Detecting alterations in documents continued. We asked that all photographs be notarized, and we're hoping that the persons who are notarizing these documents are in true honest. And we have had in the past had to actually call or to verify that these are the true representations of the documents that we are receiving. We verify signatures. We also look for spacing issues between words and letters. We check for questionable ink and paper quality, as we have now come to learn that or understand what the quality exists for most of the institutions that we receive applicants for. As is in case with Mr. Case, approximately 80 to 90% of our applicants are from the high school level. And so it's easy easier for us to do our checks, to call back to the institutions, to contact the individuals who have sent us these documents to ensure whether or not this is true. In terms of our transcripts are only received from in a sealed envelope if they are sent to us, the hard copies. And if the transcripts are emailed to us directly, we ask it to be emailed directly from the registrar's office or the certifying office and not from the applicants. We are in the process of developing credential portals. The CFGNI, that nursing organization in the United States, they're asking now for portals. So instead of us mailing documents to them, we're able to drop the documents directly to them and into their portals. And I'm finding that more institutions are requesting this. We're also engaged in e-transcripts where we send the transcript electronically to the organizations. If there are paper trails, and we look for consistency in letterheads, in the types of paper, again, as I said. How do we verify? We are now utilizing for some institutions and hope to increase on this, utilize digital credential exchange portals. So definitely we use their portal, and the transcripts and the documents requested are not being handled by too many individuals. We do random calls and sometimes specific calls if we doubt or we feel that something might be tampered with. We accept emails directly from the source, and we're now learning that there are other ways that we can improve on this so that we can ensure that the documents that we're receiving are actually authentic. We're beginning to develop relationships with verifying organizations. So from time to time, we have organizations in the United States, in Canada, outside of the North American division, where they're actually asking us to verify that these documents that they have received are authentic. So we're developing a relationship with them so that we understand their language, they understand our perspective also. In closing, I believe that today is the best day. Now is the very best time that we can place a hedge of protection around our institutions to ensure the credibility and authenticity of our degrees. As we would say in the spiritual world, we put a hedge of protection around each other. And so working together as a collaborative group, we're all putting that hedge of protection around each other. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Gregory, and to that we say amen. Lovely presentation, the forensic eye. All right, and so we move right ahead to Miss Ann Lodge, University of Technology. The floor is yours.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Brown. We are going to be presenting Miss Lodge and myself, and I will start first. I am Clayton Moore, Assistant Registrar from the University of Technology, and with me is Ann Lodge, Miss Ann Lodge, the Assistant Registrar for the Records Office. Let me start to share my screen. Okay. So we're going to go through quickly some of the things that we have also in our presentation has already been said. And so we will move quickly and not go through all. So in our presentation, we will be looking at the types of fraudulent documents, information and types of falsifications, and measures to detect and prevent fraud, and strategies to fight credential fraud. Okay, so the types of fraud, persons have mentioned the types of fraudulent documents are documents that have been altered. And so someone may present a certificate, but on that certificate, they may change some of the information, or they may present a completely fake document to us that has been created. David from Accra initially earlier on spoke about the mills, and we do receive some of those, but a small amount of those or number of those that we receive. Most of the documents that we receive that may have fraudulent information comes from certificates and transcripts. Just to share with you some information that are falsified and the types of falsification that we receive. In the main, the information that is falsified are the grades. So students and applicants are presenting to us grades, and they want to, of course, gain an advantage to enter the university. And so they change their grades. Also, there's inconsistencies at times with the profiles. So the profiles may not be consistent with the grades that they have, the font types, spelling errors, the institution format, layout. And we have some examples for you here. And as most institutions in Jamaica, most of our applicants and students have credentials from the CXC, CSEC, and CAPE. And we have some examples here. So you are seeing a certificate, an example of the layout of a certificate from CXC. And you will notice English A, general proficiency, there's a grade 1 there. However, when we look a little more closely at the profile, the person has a C for understanding and a D for expression. It is highly unlikely that someone will receive a grade 1 having those profile. Similarly, when you look at information technology, the person has received a 2 or claims to have received a 2. However, in the profile again, you have theory, that's being a D, and problem solving and programming D. You will also notice spelling errors, knowledge there on the mathematics, spelled incorrectly, solving, spelled incorrectly. And also one of the things that some persons may not know is that the CXC lists their subjects in alphabetical order. So you are seeing here biology, English A, mathematics, and information technology. However, the information technology should be before mathematics in an alphabetical order. So these are some of the things that we look for. Other things that we look for, and Dr. Manning spoke about this, missing information such as the registration number, fewer digits, the year of award. Sometimes persons want to show that their award are more recent, because of course this has implications in respect of whether they may be eligible for transfer credits. The incorrect alignment of the document, incorrect course of study, or for transcripts, the number of hours, credit hours reported. Also, interestingly, one of the things that we have experienced here at UTEC are persons presenting themselves as someone else. What do I mean by this? So someone will present to us a credential that is not theirs, and they are hoping that we would accept it as theirs. How do persons do this? Sometimes persons do this because the names are similar. However, when we check the middle initials, it is different, etc. We had a particular case where someone presented false credential to us and was hoping that in our preliminary conversation and consideration that we would make a decision. However, we decided to ask the person to obtain a transcript from the Overseas Examinations Office. And it is one of the stakeholders that we use quite frequently to verify the information. The information that comes to us, as we said, mainly from the CXC and the transcript. We are thankful, and Dr. Mann mentioned it earlier on, that the incidence of fraudulent documents presented to us has reduced, and this is because also we are able to verify since receiving or obtained information directly from the CXC. So when someone sends us documents, we're able to check, to corroborate with that information received from the CXC to say that this is in fact so. I'm going to pass over to Ms. Lodge at this moment, and she will share with you some more examples of fraudulent documents received.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. As Mr. Moore mentioned earlier, that most of our fraudulent documents received are within the Student Records Office. What we noticed that our students coming in, they are very young, so the risk of having fraudulent documents will not begin there. It begins when they enter the university. However, in 2008-19 academic year, we received over 35 fraudulent documents from namely altered transcripts, falsified academic records, including transcripts, letters, progress reports, even fabricated altered certificates. These were received from the embassies, the work and travel programs. However, what we noticed though, that the altered transcripts, upon receiving more than 5 per 1 week from the embassy, we were able to identify quickly what the issue was. Our students, because of the miscommunication from the work and travel programs, they were told that they needed to have a certain GPA of over 2 and above. So students who were not attaining those GPAs, those were the ones who were in problem. If we look on the screen, we will see samples of transcripts that were sent to us from the embassies and the work and travel programs. On my left, we have changed the names for identification purposes. The transcript on the left was altered in its totality. The grade point average reflected a 3.12. However, the person in question had a GPA of under 1.7. The transcript on my right was altered, as you can see. Upon investigation, when we retrieved that student profile, all the grades were changed. As you can see, there were B's that were altered, but the student transcript had C+, U. Overall transcript for the person, that person's GPA was 1.75. Because of our unique transcript and the formatting, the embassy quickly realized that there were some variations and sent them all to us at once. Yes. We also received certificate of verification. The left was received in 2018-19 as well from a local employer, where it was sent to us for verification. This person, upon looking at it, we know that there's no program as a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration. There's no course of study called Accounting and Human Resource Management. So it didn't take any time for us to realize that this was a fraudulent document. The one on my right was sent from an overseas office, a verified entity. This one also came to us for an employment purpose. This candidate claimed he got a Bachelor of Science in Security, Administration, and Management. No, this company that was employing this gentleman knew, because we have close collaboration with this company. So it was not far-fetched, and we know that these two studies that we received in 18-19, they were fraud. So we immediately responded to these verified companies, because one of the important components also is to verify quickly so that the problem can be solved quickly. Okay. Most of these documents were received from the embassies. They were received from the work and travel programs. They were also received from employers, also from institutions, universities, whether local and abroad. Our students were not very keen in altering the transcripts. There are some course of studies that require certain letters, whether it be a pass or a failing grade. These students were just eager to be employed on the work and travel program. So what they did, they quickly altered somebody's transcript without even looking at the key details on the transcripts. So the embassy quickly found out that something was wrong because the formatting of the documents were inconsistent, the typeface were inconsistent, there were unexplained gaps in the transcript. For instance, the transcript will have a 4-year, person with a 4-year program, but on the transcript, there are only 2-year programs. It will state that John Brown commenced a program in business administration, but at the end of the transcript, it says that John Brown completed a program in mathematics. So the embassy, because of our close collaboration with these entities, we quickly found out that over the 35 that we received, they were all fraudulent documents that were received from the embassies, the work and travel agencies, the local and international employers, and institutions. Some of the measures to detect, as I said earlier, that the formatting of the document was off. There were inconsistent typeface. There were also changes in background. As I said earlier, there were many unexplained gaps. There were eraser marks. The length of the document was out of it. The patterns of course modules were not in line with what we produced. There were many spelling errors. Even the logical sequencing of the information was incorrect. The relevance of information. There were even changes in signatures. We had signatures for previous registrars who had gone years ago. Some fields used were not inconsistent with what we're using now. There were also inconsistent grading systems. So we need to pay attention to inaccurate institutional designs and languages. I'll now take you through to some strategies that we use to fight credential fraud. We need to be current with accrediting bodies, example, UCG. We need to ensure that institution is reputable and recognized by government and other authorities. We also employ training of staff is important. We also sensitize our new students per semester. We have to ensure to let them know the consequence and the penalties that they will face, because those students who were identified, they not only were denied a visa, but these records are also placed on their permanent records. We also liaise with external agencies, especially when there are changes to policies. We request transcript from overseas office for quality purposes. We report to the police when necessary. We make notes on student records for future references as well.
Thank you. And as we continue to go through, so we ensure that the security features that the stakeholders say should be on the documents are there. And we also ensure that documents are sent to us directly from the institution. If the applicant or student takes a document in ourselves, they are securely fastened and sealed. There's proper verification of credentials. We have experienced also an increase in the number of international students who are applying to the university, and this means verification. So how do we verify those credentials? We have had to, particularly not being familiar with some of these institutions, we have had to be doing our own research. We have had to also be reaching out to registrars and personnel of other institutions to ensure that these places are reputable. As I said earlier on, if this is a well-organized diploma mill, they may have their emails, they may have persons, etc. And so there needs to be multiple avenues in order to verify these institutions. Where there are cases that we suspect, we report, as Ms. Lodge said earlier on, we do also have reported, we have had past experience where we have reported to the police incidents of fraud to ensure that we have that kind of backing. We sanction where we have any student or staff member, any personnel that have presented false documentation. And so it is that if we receive false credential, we do not make an offer to such a student, and we make the notes on the records and where it is. If we were to become aware of fraudulent documents being submitted to us, then we would rescind the offer, revoke rather the offer of the place. David spoke from Accra, spoke earlier about this, and so I just want, as we close, want to mention this. Since the pandemic, we have had to be more careful in respect of how do we verify information, because also as an institution, we are allowing persons to initially submit to us their documents by email or other means. Then we recognize that we have to be more vigilant also that the number and the types of persons verifying these documents. So we may have guidance counselors of course can be many and we're not familiar. And so we recognize that we have to be extending the collaboration with other institutions to ensure that we better fight credential fraud. So those are our experiences, and we thank you very much.
And we thank you too, Mr. Moore and Mr. Lodge, for sharing your experiences. Certainly most enlightening, very informative. And I'm pretty sure you're going to be hearing from a lot of us as we seek to strengthen our processes and our systems and employ some of the strategies as you have suggested. All right, so moving right along to bring this session to its end, so to speak, institution's perspective. We're now going to be hearing from Dr. Marsha Morgan Allen. So, Dr. Morgan Allen.
Good morning, everyone. I'm trying to share screen, but I'm not able to.
As soon as Mr. Moore could close their screen, I think you should have access. Dr. Morgan, okay.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Yes, we've come to the last presenter. That's me. I hope that you all have been enjoying this session. I certainly have been. Essentially, I guess maybe I'll be providing summary for my previous colleagues, the presenters, because I see that we're all on the same page. All right, so today, just like them, I'll be speaking to you about our experiences here at the University of the West Indies, specifically the areas detecting fraud, our admissions process, and strategies to prevent fraud. Now, just a glance at the University of the West Indies. Come next year, we'll be 75 years old. And, you know, we started back in 1948 with only 33 medical students. Today, we have nearly 50,000 students and 5 campuses, moving from Mona in Jamaica to St. Augustine in Trinidad and Tobago, Cave Hill in Barbados, 5 Islands in Antigua and Barbuda, open campus and 10 global centers in partnership with universities in North America, Latin America, Asia, Africa, and Europe. We offer over 800 certificate, diploma, undergraduate, and postgraduate degree options in various disciplines. We have been consistently ranked among the top universities globally by the most reputable ranking agency, Times Higher Education. And so in the current global field of some 30,000 universities and elite research institutes, the UII stands among the top 1.5%. Now, how many incidences of fraudulent academic qualifications have we come across here at Mona? And I struggled with this question because truthfully, we have had not many. I had put less than 10 cases and it could be less than 5, but to be on the safe side, detect, I would say 10 cases. And in most of these instances, it was altered CXC certificates, CAPE and CSEC. What we should note is that it wasn't that the applicants or the persons use a different type of paper. It was the actual certificate paper issued by the CXC body. And so it is authentic, but what we detected was that information was tampered with. And usually the information that is falsified on that document would be the name, the grade, and the profile. For instance, we have seen in most cases, the C, the D, or the E turning into a B, right? And that is in the profile section. And when you look on the profile, sometimes I don't even realize that what is on the profile section of that certificate, it must match the overall final grade. So you will pick up on differences in the type of font or the font size, because sometimes they use typewriter, sometimes they use their hand. There's also irregular spacing between the words or letters. You know, something is just off. You will see a little bit of smudging. It's not so clear because as they try to change that letter, there's always something there left behind. So you have to look carefully to see if the wording and the lettering is clear, no smudge, no erasures. The ink color and quality is sometimes a little bit off because they can't catch the original ink color and quality. And like I said before, the letter grades in the profile do not match the overall final grade. Usually when you contact them and ask them to, you know, most times they would send in their preliminary slip, or if it is that they submitted this falsified document and you contact them, you will hear all kinds of excuses. Oh, you know, we have lost our certificate. It was so long ago. The parent or guardian who kept it for them, you know, had died. All kinds of excuses.
Right. Dr. Allen, I'm so sorry. I'm so very sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Just wanted to point out that your slides aren't moving.
Oh, they're moving here from my end, you know.
No, they are not.
They're
not in the slide mode. So you might just quickly make that adjustment. I'm so sorry to interrupt.
Okay, 1 second. Is it moving now? Is it moving?
Yes. It's
Yes,
not in presentation mode.
But it is not it's not in slideshow mode. But it has advanced. We are at 7. So if you just scooter across to your right from current slide, if you click on that, you should be good.
Hello. What sort of response did you get?
Right, so click on that. Yes.
Is it better now?
Right, so click on where you are at the icon from current slide. Just click on it.
Icon from current slide.
Right, your cursor is on it, so if you just click on it.
Stop share live. Your screen share is paused. Is it okay now?
All right, let's continue. You're on your 7th slide. So we are seeing that it's not in slide mode, but we can see. So you could continue. Oh, we have lost sharing now.
Okay. Okay, you're still not seeing?
Good.
Oh, you're
So-
seeing it now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you too.
Sorry about that. All right, so let me give you a brief overview of our admissions process. So we receive approximately 9,000 to 10,000 applications annually. And the majority of the applicants use CXC credentials to matriculate. We do not process applications solely on preliminary slips. And this is because the preliminary slips, they're easy to be tampered with. We do accept them though, if it is that the examinations were done in the same year the person is applying, but that is not the sole premise on which we evaluate their application. Now, prior to 2011, our admissions process was a little bit outdated. And so persons had to bring in their transcripts, the CXC certificates, hard copy into us. And we would verify these documents along, ensure that everything is okay. Now, can you imagine with over 9,000 to 10,000 applicants bringing in documents, not just the CXC certificates, but they would have been bringing in other supporting documents, their birth certificates, recommendations, we have different forms to be filled out, especially for the professional programs. So and the crowd in the office. So you're there moving, collecting these documents. You're not able to actually spend some time checking for any fraudulent submission. The high school guidance counselors, we would ask them to assist us. So they would collect their certificates, the copies, and present to us in batches. And that would also help us. Across the region, those who are not in Jamaica, we ask our own UE admissions team at our open campus sites and landed campuses to assist us in this regard. And so, in all of that, I think that prior to 2011, we really used to have high rates of fraudulent and tampered documents being submitted to us. The manual credentials verification process was indeed a very tedious task. And because of this verification and data entry, it was a manual data entry thing for, sometimes we had to enter the grades manually. It was very time consuming. And so applicants took a long time to take in their certificates. We could move forward without these certificates. And so, it hampered the rate at which we would process these applications in time for school to begin. And so we took a decision back in 2010 to review our admissions process, identify the bottlenecks. And so we re-engineered our business process so that we could expedite the processing of our applications. Applicants now had the option of doing everything online. So they could scan certified copies of these documents and upload them, all right, to the application portal, and we could view them, all right? Now, there is a risk there. What we also did was to engage CXC in an agreement, right? We had an agreement with the CXC body so that we would submit the names of our applicants to them with certain data, and they would send back those results to us. Of course, this was done with the permission of the applicants. And like I said, that would have posed a big risk to our business processes. And so what we did now was to implement some measures to mitigate against that. So we had initially started out with using our local justices of the peace to certify the documents. In a bid, to spread it wide, open up the access, because persons, we didn't want them to leave, come to Kingston, go to our Western Jamaica campus, or to any one of our open campus sites. They had their justices of the peace right there in their area with them. What we found though, was that the justices of the peace were not so vigilant. We had reports whereby persons didn't show the JPs, the original document. And so the JPs were certifying the copies, not seeing the original. In some cases, the certification by the JP is not done on the face of the document, but rather on the back or on a separate page. So exactly what were they certifying? So we decided to discontinue that arrangement. And so they had to go to only those certified ones. And like I said, that would have been the high school representative or a UA representative. We also asked applicants to give us the permission so that we could request their CXC grades from the examination body. And in doing the verification of their application, we look at all the academic credentials. And so we look at their name, their date of birth, the school at which they graduated from, the school at which they sat the exams. Because, you know, you do have some that do private examinations at private centers. The grades that they would have indicated when they applied online, the CXC electronic data that we received, and the documents that they uploaded. So our verification process, as we call it, validation, is very time consuming and tedious. But once we get through that, then we know that everything is okay, because admissions is really on the basis of their academic credentials. Even though we have other supporting documents, this is what we base largely our decisions on. All right, and so, you know, we also look at the age at which they did the exam, the date of the CXC examinations, and the high school graduation date, because, you know, you kind of gauge around that time that they would have been doing the exam. So you look for these red flags also. Persons who sat the CXC exams prior to the data that we receive from CXC and cannot locate their certificates, we advise them to request a transcript from the local Overseas Examinations Council and that it be sent directly to us. Sometimes we do reach out to CXC directly, but sometimes that can be a challenge when you're sending them all these one names. Now, when they upload copies of the CXC certificate, CXC itself has implemented some security features, as Dr. Manning had mentioned before. And one of them that, you know, jumps out at you is that when you copy a CXC certificate, the word copy can be seen all over on the certificate. So you know that that is a copy. If it was a different paper being used for the certificate, then you would not have had that security feature. If we identify discrepancies, we ask the applicant to take in the original certificates to us here at Mona. And if a copy was uploaded to the application portal also, we also make contact with them. In Jamaica, if we still find discrepancies, we don't really engage the applicant because they can tell us anything or bring in anything. What we do is to engage the high school that would have sat, that would have been the center for their examination. Take, for instance, we've had cases whereby the name on the application that they submitted to us, there's some discrepancy between that and the CXC certificate. So we asked the school to give us a letter to say that so-and-so was, you know, the one and same person. What we were told by the high schools, though, is that it could be a genuine mistake, because when the students are registering for CXC, and you know, whether it be CSEC or CAPE, the schools do not check to see if the information is correct, meaning their name, their date of birth, and maybe some of the exams that the subjects that they would have registered for. That responsibility, they say, lie with the applicant and the parent or guardian. So we have to be mindful that mistakes can be made, right? But we try to get all kind of data together before we make an informed decision. In the region, those persons are asked to make contact with their Ministry of Education. We go through our open campus sites in our 16 territories. And, you know, those islands are very close. Everybody knows each other. And so we're able to do verification in a very quickly manner. Applicants outside of the region, far outside the Caribbean regions, for example, in the African countries, we make contact with the High Commissioner or the consulate in those countries, and they have been quite useful. Now, for those persons who are not using the CXC qualifications to matriculate, but are using, a diploma, an associate degree, or a bachelor's degree, especially to our professional programs, we ask that these college transcripts be sent directly from institution to institution. So you look on the postmark, right? Most of them are sent by a courier service. So you actually see where it's coming from. We do not accept computer-generated student copies. Hard copies can be hand-delivered by the applicant, but the envelopes must be sealed and have a tamper-proof seal. The electronic copies that we accept must also be password protected. Some of them are so password protected that even though you enter the password and you open it, in trying to save it, it may allow you to save, but when you go back to retrieve it, it is again asking you for that password. So some of them are really password protected, very, very secure. And we ask that they be sent directly from the registrar's office using the school's email domain. And if there are any discrepancy, again, we can always reach out to the registrar's office for explanation. The institutions that we receive transcripts from that we're not familiar with, what we do is that we use the internet, for one, to look to see if there are any diploma mills. We look to see if they're accredited, and we also supplement that search now with the latest edition of Barron's Profile of American Colleges, the latest edition. Applicants are also advised to contact the UCJ for interpretation or equivalency of their qualifications. So we rely on UCJ as a partner in informing us the equivalency of that qualification. And applicants are also asked to contact their embassies or modern languages unit for interpretation if the transcript is in a foreign language. When we get these transcripts, we examine them carefully. So you look at the biographical information, you look at the logo, you look at the seal, the signatures, you look at the security features, and usually these transcripts explain what you are supposed to look for on the back of it. We look at the sequence of semester dates and award dates. You look to see if there are any gaps. Program duration and length, you know typically how long these programs are. So you look to see how long these programs are. If it's too short, you look to see if the person had transferred in some credits from somewhere, or was exempted from some of these courses. You look at the alignment, the font size, the font, type of font, and you look at the signatures to see if those persons are still the persons who should be signing on these transcripts. Now, one thing that I wanted to point out before I close is that in addition to these academic credentials, one area of fraud, and I'm not sure if persons are aware, is that students also falsify student verification letters and forms. You would have heard my previous presenters talking about this work and study program, right? Embassies, they're going away on vacation or they're going away to work. What we have found is that persons, we have more cases of them tampering with status letters. For instance, our status letters will say the person is not registered, or they selected courses because they have fees outstanding, they're not fully registered. And so you find that they will tamper with those dates to say that they are registered. They use these letters for financial assistance, to renew their health card, their health benefits. They use it for employment. They use it for embassy purposes and for the work and study program. Now, just this week on Monday, one of the government ministries here reached out to us, sent us a copy of a status letter. And when we looked at the status letter verifying, they wanted to verify if the person is still here as a student. And because the person was seeking employment there. When we looked at it, the department at the very top of the letterhead, the department that they had that processed that letter, and the current letter dated in February, that department no longer processes status letters. That's one. Two, the identification number did not match this particular student. Now, this student well, not really a student, because that person only did 1 semester here with us. And that was the first semester in the academic year of 2016-17. That person has not returned, okay? The name of the program that the person indicated, we no longer offer that program. The person who signed the letter, I couldn't even tell you who that is, but it is certainly not the person who is now signing it. So in addition to and so these verification letters and forms are also very important, because they're going to third parties and the students are presenting them as authentic documents coming from the institution. So we need to be aware of that too, in terms of HR practices and also for other means and ways. So thank you so much for having me. And I do hope that I have, really added to this body of knowledge.
And Dr. Morgan Allen, we say thank you. And we want to assure you that you added greatly to this body of knowledge.
Thank you.
And in fact, you added tremendously to this whole discussion. And I know the sentiments that have been expressed so far and continue to be expressed in the chat as it relates to these presentations hold for you as well. And just to indicate, I've been seeing in the chat, presentations are hard to beat, absolutely awesome, fulfilling and empowering. My competencies have been tremendously enhanced from these presentations. Practical, great job, excellent. Just to share a few of the expressions that have been appearing in the chat from all of us here. And so to the presenters, we want to say thank you so very much for such a great job, discussing a topic that is absolutely relevant and most timely. And so at this point, want to encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to place any questions that you have for presenters in the Q&A section. One of the questions I've seen there so far is one we have been getting from morning, as it relates to whether or not these presentations will be made available to all of who are here on the platform. All right, so I don't know if someone from UCJ wishes to respond, but what we heard initially to the first presentation was that it was a yes. So I guess we'll get confirmation on that a little later. All right, so I'm looking in the chat, and one of the questions I see here is there a charge for verification services within the different institutions or agencies? And any of our presenters, might wish to just unmute and comment on, respond to that question, please. I see Dr. Morgan Allen, yes, please go right ahead.
Okay, so I speak for UWI. No, we do not. we get these verification requests pretty often, and we try to turn them around as quickly as possible, because we know the importance. We have students, graduates who have gone overseas seeking work, who are furthering their academic aspirations. We also have, as I mentioned to you, that we have employers here in Jamaica who reach out to us, but no, we do not. I know for those employers who also fund, for those who fund the program of studies for their staff, they also seek a verification, and so there's no charge.
All right, thank you very much for sharing that. Any of our institutions here have a charge and would wish to indicate such?
Yes, there's a charge at the Overseas Examinations Commission. And that is why I stated earlier when I presented that if the student requests the transcript to be sent directly to the office, directly to the institution who needs to verify the results, the student pay directly in the form of a transcript fee. However, if the institution reach out to us for the verification, they will have to absorb those charges.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing that, Ms. Harris. All right, Dr. Gregory.
Yes, thank you very much. If the institution requests from us, there is not a charge for the student, but for transcripts, the students are responsible for the charge and for the method of delivery.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Dr. Gregory. All right. We have another question here. It reads, do you have to write any of these fraudulent facts in policy? Or are they understood as illegal and matters for litigation? So any of our presenters would like to respond to this? Again, you could just unmute and go right ahead, please.
Dr. Brown? All right.
Would you like me to repeat? Okay.
No, that's all right. I'll go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Moore.
All right. So the question asked about writing in facts into the policies. I think when we write in policies that we, of course, look at the overarching objective, and we would indicate most universities, let me triangle here, most universities would have in their policies statements as to a caveat that if someone presents fraudulent documentation, then we will reserve the right to respond to that, reserve the right to revoke the offer of a place for a student, and we also may take that beyond because it is a legal matter. And as we have done here at UTech, to have actually reported some of the matters to the police. So in terms of policy formulation and documentation, it is about ensuring that applicants and students understand what the actions that the university may take. We do also sensitize students and applicants of our policies through our various forums. So the main thing is that we have an overarching statement to say to the student, what is our policy in respect of if you submit fraudulent documents and what you can expect from us. So I think it's an overarching directive that we give.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Mr. Moore. Dr. Morgan Allen, you wanted to respond to that as well?
Right, thank you. Just to add that in our offer letter, we do have a clause that states that we have the right to rescind or to revoke that offer. So if it is that we find something, adverse against that applicant subsequent to the offer being sent, we have a right to take back that offer. If the student is if that person is a registered student here, we have measures in place. I mentioned earlier the status letter, and they do tamper with their own electronic copies of transcripts from our student management system. So if it is that something is brought to our attention, there is a disciplinary committee that handles such a matter, and the student is given the right to a hearing. They can bring legal representation with them, and the matter is investigated until a decision is made. And we do have a board for a subcommittee on student matters, and it reports into the academic board. So instances of disciplinary action for students, that is also escalated to our academic board, and a decision is taken from there.
All right, thank you so very much for that, Dr. Morgan Allen. All right, and we
sorry, but I should add also that if an applicant submits a falsified document, legally, I don't think that we have a leg to stand on as an institution, because the person is not one of our students. So we can't really act So we would just indicate, as UTEC had said before, when their presentation, you would indicate on their application. So for future application, that comment is there that, look, this was what was found in a previous application, and we look out for that.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Morgan Allen. This question is directed to Dr. Manning, and it asks, please explain, Dr. Manning, the process by which an institution would receive the e-certificate for matriculation. And I'm wondering as well whether or not the second question might not be yours to answer as well. So I just pose it in the interest of time. Is it possible for applicants to have their CSEC exam results populated automatically when applying to an institution?
Thank you very much, Dr. Brown. All right, so the first question, I'll start by saying in my presentation, I said that we did a pilot in 2018. And this year, we know that we have done an improvement in terms of the learning coming out of that particular pilot, we are going to be moving forward with that. Well, we are doing the development and we'll be moving forward with the implementation. So of course, we are going to be engaging individuals in that regard. The second point I want to make in responding to the question about the receiving for matriculation is after we have completed the second bout of the establishment of the particular tool, the platform that we are using to build for the blockchain, using the blockchain technology. That is when we are going to engage the stakeholders and they will receive their e-certificate. So we are not doing that at this particular time. What I was sharing is where we are going in relation to having learned from the pilot, building out our system, and we are going to commence. It's June, actually, 2020. So we are looking actually to utilize and facilitate e-certification this year. But all our marketing and communication, I did say, will be done, and we'll share all of what I just shared with you and more in relation to what it means to you. What does a digital identity mean? Remember, I also mentioned engaging the parents and the guardians for the underage candidates, things like that. So we'll be in the media, actually engaging you, our stakeholders, to ensure that you understand what to expect in terms of an employer, higher education institution, and what to expect from the perspective of a candidate and the parent and guardian. I hope that helped for the first e-certificate for matriculation. The other question in terms of the possible applicants to have CSEC examination results populated automatically. Well, okay, right. So I'm sure I heard the University of West Indies sharing that they do get information from us. They get results after the candidate would have given approval for their information to be shared with the institution. So how that is done is that when you apply, you would indicate to the institution that you would like your results to be shared immediately as the preliminary results become available with the university or the college for the purposes of matriculation, for them to utilize for matriculation. However, if it is that we do not have a partnership with the university, you will have to write us directly. I can put an email in the chat and you can write to us and ask us to send the preliminary results to the university for you.
All right, beautiful. And thank you so much, Dr. Manning, for responding to both those two questions. Colleagues, I know you have a lot more, but we are moving behind time a bit. And so we want to take up Dr. Manning on our offer to, share with her any questions we have, any additional information that we require. And I'm pretty sure the other presenters would be open to that as well. So on that note, once again, we want to say thank you so very much to all our presenters, for an excellent job. As I also saw in the chat, time well spent indeed. So at this juncture, we are gonna hand over to Dr. Angela Penny, who is the Director of Quality Planning and Evaluation at the University Council of Jamaica. And she's going to share with us a little around the employee survey results having to do with an academic credential fraud survey that was conducted recently by the UCJ. So Dr. Penny, we hand over to you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good afternoon. Allow me to slideshow. Can you believe me? Good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you very much, Dr. Brown. Like students, what we see and what we know is that job applicants also rely on their credentials to, sorry, this computer, also rely on their academic credentials to get jobs. I'm sorry, the video not coming up, but so, but as is known that a number of our students may not only lie on their CVs, but they may also engage in falsifying their credentials. And so while when we were preparing for this webinar, we sought to reach out to human resource professionals. And so we collaborated with the Human Resource Management Association of Jamaica, HRMAJ, to conduct a survey among HR professionals to be able to shed some light to the extent to which job seekers would be presenting fraudulent academic documents, as well as to learn about the measures in place in our organizations to detect and prevent credential fraud. And so in this section, I'll just share with you very quickly the results that we got, the preliminary survey, and we hope at some time in the future, we will be able to conduct additional research. So as indicated before, the research was conducted among HR professionals. And of the respondents, what we found, 40% of the respondents were from organizations in the education sector. They were right across the board, industries right across the board, but 40% of our HR professionals who responded to the survey was from the education sector. 100% indicated that they had over 10 years experience in the field. We had 90% of the HR professionals working in large organizations with over 50 employees. And then we had 10% in a small organization, which is 1 to 5 employees. On the issue of detection, so we asked about whether or not how many fraudulent credentials they were able to detect, and if they have over the last 3 years. And 90% indicated that they detected no fraudulent academic records, and 10% indicated that they detected 5 over the last 3 years. When we asked about what level, for those who detected, we asked what level of qualification were they detecting?
Hi, Dr. Penny. I'm so very sorry. I have to interrupt you. I'm so sorry. Your slides aren't moving as well, so I'm just wanted to point that out.
Wow. Sorry, thank you for that. It's moving on my side. Sorry, I'm not sure what happened.
I guess it's a similar glitch like Dr. Morgan Allen.
Okay, give me a second here. So what happened? Any progress, any movement?
No, it's
No,
still at the
just-
first slide.
Just recommend that you stop share and then reshare the, okay, well, you
Okay,
look like
thank
you
you.
moved there now. Just put it in presentation mode.
Thank you. From the beginning. Are you seeing my screen now?
Yeah, but you need to put it in presentation mode now. So just click on the from right.
You know that I did that. Are you seeing presentation mode?
No, not yet.
Oh my goodness. I did just that. Oh boy.
Hello.
I'm going to try and bear with me, sorry. Why is that happening? All of this are tested. I'm getting some help here, not sure what's up. From the beginning. Are you seeing my presentation now? Oh dear.
Yes, but it's not in presentation mode. We are seeing slide 2.
Yeah, and that's it. I'm in presentation mode, sorry. I'm getting some help. Okay, colleagues, sorry about that. Are you seeing in presentation mode at this time?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so, right. So I will, as indicated before, that we conducted this very short survey, within limited time, and we hope that in the future that we'll be able to continue to get some more fulsome information, so to speak. So we collaborate with Ermaj to get information. Did you see the movement?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, we are.
Right, thank you. So we collaborated with our HR professionals, as indicated before, and the majority were from the education sector, with having over 10 years of experience, and the majority were also from large organizations. When asked about detection in terms of over the last 3 years, how many false academic records or documents have you detected? 90% said no such detection, and 10% indicated that detected 5. Qualification level. We asked about, so for those that you detected, what were the levels? And you, as seen on the screen here, bachelor's degree, doctoral degrees, and doctorate degrees, and of course, CXC qualifications. The type of fraudulent, type of credential frauds experienced by our HR professionals, they indicated the top 3: certificates from bogus institutions, counterfeit academic documents, forged academic documents, as we have been hearing from the other presenters, and of course, falsified transcripts was at the bottom of the list in terms of the documents that they experience. The top areas for where there were falsification or alterations, what were the top areas? And these are they, as noted, discrepancies between documents, and we heard that this morning as well, grades on the transcript, level of awards, information on courses, where all of the institution seal and emblem, questionable paper quality that came up as well from our HR professionals, signatures, erasures and smudges, alteration of grades. When we asked about whether or not they believe that the incidence of credential fraud was increasing, 100% of our HR professionals says no, that they do not believe that there's an increase in incidents. And then we asked about, so having detected fraudulent qualifications, do you report such to the police? And you can see on the screen there, we have 30%, roughly 38% saying yes, and the majority is saying no, which is approximately 63% saying no, that we do not report same to the police. And we asked about whether or not persons were able to share any stories of their experiences. And I just chose these two stories. And in one case, it was a member of the executive management team that presented a false doctoral qualification. And in another story that was shared, also discrepancies were detected on a doctoral certificate, and the organization reached out to the institution for confirmation. And of course, they found that no such records exist as presented by the applicant or the employee, and that person was terminated. And I've found it also interesting where they say that the individual also submitted fraudulent motor vehicle documents. So we asked, so what is it that you do? What is it that you really do to verify the academic documents that you receive from applicants? And our HR professionals shared that from time to time, they do engage in training, and a number of organizations were saying that we do have training exercises in relation to be able to detect the fraudulent documents, that they use tools, as noted there on the point. Then there's also the issue of the use of verifying firms, where they do verify. They make the copies themselves. So they ask for the original documents, and then they do make the copies themselves in-house. And of course, when they get the documents, they do scrutinize it, looking for those security features. And of course, they do make direct contact with the issuing institution. They also they ask for transcript in sealed envelopes. They intensive and extensive background checks. And we see here reliance on the UCJ, the credential assessment statement provided by the UCJ, because we do offer credential assessment services as noted on the program. So when we ask, so how many of you really do use verification services? And you see the results. 70% says not at all. We don't use verification services. 10% saying sometimes we do that. And only 20% of HR professionals that responded to the survey indicated that they use verification services all the time. So we also asked, do you think that your organization is effective in terms of detecting fraudulent qualifications? And you see the results, just 22% saying that they're very effective, 66%, 60, roughly 67% indicating that they're effective. And we have just 11% saying somewhat effective. So we asked, do you have a HR policy in relation to dealing with academic fraud? And you would have heard some of the questions that were responded to earlier. And 40%, only 40% indicated that yes, we do, but 60% of the HR professionals who responded indicated that no, they do not have such a policy in place. And I really do hope that after this session that we've had this morning, that it is something that our HR professionals will consider putting in place, a policy regarding academic credentials or fraudulent academic credentials. And that's it in a nutshell in relation to our survey that was conducted. And we hope, of course, that somewhere down the line, we'll be able to continue to get additional information, which we'll be able to share with our stakeholders. Thank you.
And we say thanks to you too, Dr. Penny. Certainly a very insightful set of results here coming out of that survey, and certainly indicates where we have been making some good strides, but certainly areas for improvement. Thank you so very much for that. So colleagues, what a rich day we have had. And certainly we all will concur. It was a morning very, very well spent. You know, it is said that the wise person values insight and is happy to get any information that will grant him a clever view into the underlying circumstances, conditions, and causes of problems. And for certainty, the fact that we are all here today, and in fact, at one point in time, we were over 200 persons on this platform, it certainly is an indication that we are indeed wise. And we certainly value the opportunity that today presented for us to gain insights into credential fraud and diploma mills in the digital environment. And absolutely, we are walking away from this platform this afternoon much better poised to act wisely as we navigate this problem as examiners, as institutions, and as a country. The thanks, the bigger voter thanks, is left for the Executive Director of the University Council of Jamaica, Mrs. Althea Heron. But before I invite her to do that, I just want to say on your behalf, I'm going to, on your behalf, to say thank you, UCJ, for having conceptualized this webinar. It was absolutely timely, and your selection of presenters was a stroke of genius. So Dr. Heron, from all of us, thank you as you're about to give the vote of thanks. What a pleasure to have been here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brown. And good afternoon to everyone. You know, it is said that thank you is a prayer that cannot be seen or touched. It must be felt by the heart. And we are now at the end of our Quality Assurance Week of activities. We have now concluded our 17th year under the theme, Maintaining Quality in Higher Education in a Digital Environment. Each day's sub-theme was aligned to the theme. And first of all, I must thank our Minister of Education, Honorable Fayval Williams, who opened the week's activities and reiterated the commitment of her ministry and the government to the assurance of quality in higher education. Special thanks to Mr. Peter van der Heijden, who was our keynote speaker, and he came to us all the way from Brussels, and he is actually the higher education specialist at the European Union. Our special appreciation is extended to the chairs for the 3 days. We had Professor Andrew Spencer on Tuesday, Dr. Vivian Quarry yesterday, and today, Dr. Ruby Brown. Dr. Brown, I thank you very much for moderating and steering the day's proceedings. Likewise, this is also extended to the presenters, to the other moderators for the previous 2 days. A special thanks to Dr. Jeanette Bartley Bryan, who moderated the panel discussion. There was an exciting panel discussion yesterday pertaining to online assessments. So all the moderators, they were engaging and provided us with guidance throughout the day's proceedings. And for that, we would like to extend our appreciation and the time that you took to prepare and to articulate the summations, because that had helped the proceedings and to bring some clarity to what was presented. A special thanks to our invitees or specially invited persons to give us, invoke the presence of the Lord during the 3 days. Without, as you know, without the Lord's blessings, we bring our plans to him. We ask for his blessings, and it has turned out to be a successful event. So thank you very much. We could not have deemed the 17th Quality Assurance Week in Higher Education a success without the local, regional, and international speakers and presenters who were with us for the 3 days and through their presentations highlighted key points and gave us great insights into micro-credentialing, flexible learning pathways, and how it can be used as a tool in developing a nation through lifelong learning. Also in giving us strategies to enhance, maintain, promote authenticity and integrity in online assessments in our learning environments, as well as the techniques for detecting fraudulent academic documents and degree mills, which continue to be a global threat in this digital environment. So again, I thank you all. Based on the feedback in the chats and the Q&A section, the participants appreciated all the information. They have found it to be rich, timely, insightful, thought-provoking, and enlightening. So thank you again. A special thanks to the Human Resource Management Association of Jamaica for administering the employers survey on our behalf to the HR professionals, which, as you see, have revealed their experiences in detecting credentialing fraud at the workplace. And to you, our valued stakeholders, who decided to spend the time with us and to choose to participate in this capacity building and developmental exercise. You were engaged, and based on your expressions in the chat, you thoroughly enjoyed the sessions. We thank you for your thought-provoking questions, and we hope you, and we also welcomed the feedback. If you intend or if you wish to, we notice that there are questions about how would you be able to access these presentations. Well, if you'd like to recap any of these sessions, they are on our YouTube page. And so just look for when you go to YouTube, look for the University Council of Jamaica, and you will see that. So all 3 days presentations are there. An event of this nature or dimension cannot happen overnight. So the wheels started rolling months before, and we have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated team leaders here at the UCJ, as well as team leaders and staff. I cannot thank everyone enough for their involvement. They have rallied around a common cause and rose to the occasion. The endless hours and sleepless nights to ensure that all critical details were addressed. That time spent was certainly not wasted. And so I implore all participants, as I wrap up, I implore you all to do the evaluations so that we may be able to ensure continued improvements in our activities and to better serve you. If the time is money, then today you would have spent millions for us. Thank you all for making the 17th Quality Assurance Week in Higher Education a successful event as we continue to assure quality in higher education. Have a good afternoon, everyone, and a good weekend when it comes. God bless you.
And thank you, Mrs. Heron, and we wish for you the same. Thank you so much. All right. So here we have it. Beautiful.